qué me dejas? Bueno, mira, señora, ay señorita, nadie sabía lo que iba a pasar. Solamente fuiste y me dejaste solito en la eternidad. Señora, ay señorita, yo sé que ahora estás lejos de mí y siempre estoy pensando lo que estás haciendo y si te sientes más feliz, y si te sientes más feliz, oye. Espero yo que no te sientas sola y que tu vida está llena de felicidad, porque deseo que nadie tenga que sentirse ahora mismo como yo, atrapado en la oscuridad, solito en la eternidad, solito en la eternidad, oye. Trompeta. Saxofón con Cristian. Toca. Sola y que tu vida está llena de felicidad, porque deseo que nadie tenga que sentirse ahora mismo como yo, atrapado en la oscuridad y solito en la eternidad. Ay señora, ay señora, vuélvete acá, vuélvete. Ay señora, ya se fue. Yo. Okay, one sec. Kaiser Soze. How you guys doing? I'm back. And we have breaking news. The resigned Trump official Joe Kent just had a sit-down interview, or at least it was released, with Tucker Carlson. And so we're going to take a look at this. This is obviously relevant to the broader narrative about the illegal and unjustified Iran war of choice, war of aggression, engaged by Israel and the United States of America. And that being said, I'm highly critical of Joe Kent and of Tucker Carlson, so I'm sure there'll be plenty for us to sink our teeth into. Also announced that apparently from major news organizations, Joe Kent is now under criminal investigation by the FBI.
We want to start tonight with a clip from January of 2024. This is from this show, and this is Joe Kent, who later went on to become, until yesterday, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Here it is.
What do you think the immediate and then longer term effects of a war with Iran would be on the United States?
Immediately, it would be very bloody. I have no doubt that we could probably defeat some of their air defense and go in there and have another shock and awe campaign. But again, like we saw how the shock and awe campaign in Iraq really didn't actually work in the long run. So I have no doubt that we'd have some immediate results that people would cheer about here in the United States. But Iran, Persia, has always been an empire. It's been around longer than any of the other players in the modern Middle East right now, and they are not going anywhere. If we get deeply involved and deeply entangled with Iran, we are playing right into China's hands, because China would like nothing more than for us to be committing our military industrial base to a war in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, and then to be committing our conventional military power, our blood and our treasure, back in the Middle East. That will make the Pacific, our actual border, extremely vulnerable to Chinese aggression. Or China will simply just watch us bleed out economically as we bleed out on the battlefield on these couple different theaters. It's absolute insanity. It's opening up Pandora's box. And again, for what gain to the American people?
That's pre-resignation. But keep in mind that Joe Kent's decision to resign in the way he did, and notwithstanding this even potentially being a long-term opinion of him, even if it were true, doesn't cut against the notion that this is all self-serving, and the reason he's doing this is purely looking at himself, perhaps at JDA, perhaps at others. But I don't step away from that opinion. And there are other tweets and statements from him where he seems very encouraging of additional strikes on Iran, including, by the way, in his letter, where he suggested it was the right thing to strike Iran, or at least an Iranian official in Iraq, that is Soleimani, back in Trump's first term.
So the very first thing you notice about that clip, which was shot almost exactly a year before the current president was inaugurated, is that it was right. It was prescient. He called it. He called the general outline. Not that it was hard to call, but Joe Kent knows what he's talking about. He spent a lot of his life in that region. And he said, a year before this current presidency began, this is a big, serious country. It's the oldest civilization in the region. And if we went to war with Iran, there would be a momentary sugar high. Americans would support it because they support their own country, and they certainly support their military, and people would approve of it.
By the way, if it is to be believed, Tucker and Joe Kent now are under investigation. There's going to be
a CIA referral to the DOJ on Tucker Carlson, and obviously the recently announced investigation into Joe Kent for like leaking. So both these people potentially on the hook for criminal charges.
But very quickly, you could see a process by which we got caught there, trapped there, bear trap. Hard to extricate yourself from that. And sitting on the sidelines would be our chief global competitor, China, who would be silently nodding along with a slowly spreading grin, knowing that they were the main beneficiary of what they were seeing, of our waste of American lives and treasure, as Joe Kent said. So we haven't reached that stage, thankfully. We're moving toward it, and everyone who's watching carefully knows that. And if you're honest, you know that. So this is a very serious moment we're in, and we're watching not just a war in Iran, but potentially a total realignment of the world and the loss, in some sense, of what the United States has globally. This could be the beginning of the end of our influence in a lot of the world, and that's just the beginning. So again,
by the way, we have also a Yahoo YouGov poll just released that shows Trump's approval with independents at 27%. That is a horrible number for Republicans. Underwater among independents on immigration by 22, underwater on Iran by 35, underwater on foreign policy by 41, underwater on the economy by 47, underwater on cost of living by 60. Pretty insanely bad poll results. What's this treasure he's referring to? Is he doing one-piece memes? Are they very musical people? Yeah, people just like get these phrases in certain arcs, blood and treasure, and it just becomes a way to, I don't know, evocatively reference the economic effects. And they are direct fiscal economic effects, as well as the broader economy, prices, that kind of shit, which I'm sure many of you are already feeling.
That's a big deal. It's starting to dawn on people, and that leaves Joe Kent as one of the relatively few people connected to this administration who said it in public. Is that good or bad? Well, it may seem good. Of course, you want to be around people who have clarity about what's going to happen next. But in practical terms, it's bad. In fact, it's always bad. Whenever you have somebody who stands up and says, don't do this, here's what could happen.
And by the way, here's just another statement by Trump, because Israel took an action against oil infrastructure. And so this is Trump's statement on Israel and its attack on oil infrastructure, where there was reporting that there was prior American authorization. So this is Trump related to that incident that happened, I think, today or yesterday. Quote, Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. A relatively small section of the whole has been hit. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack, and the country of Qatar was in no way, shape, or form involved with it, nor did it have any idea that it was going to happen. Unfortunately, Iran did not know this or any of the pertinent facts pertaining to the South Pars attack, and unjustifiably and unfairly attacked a portion of Qatar's LNG gas facility. No more attacks will be made by Israel pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pars field unless Iran unwisely decides to attack a very innocent, in this case Qatar, in which instance the United States of America, with or without the help or consent of Israel, will massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field at an amount of strength and power that Iran has never seen or witnessed before. I do not want to authorize this level of violence and destruction because of the long-term implications that it will have on the future of Iran, but if Qatar's LNG is attacked again, I will not hesitate to do so. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So it's completely out of control. It is completely out of control. Trump is unable to rein in Israel whatsoever. There is no coordination. He's saying Israel is acting out of anger, lashing out. And when Qatar, with whom the administration, I shouldn't say the administration, the Trump family has numerous financial connections, deep business dealings, when they come crying, now Trump is going to make another threat, yet another threat. But how is Trump going to contain Israel? If Israel, quote, can't contain its anger, out of anger, and violently lashed out, and has a tendency to do that, how can this be a promise that Trump is able to comply with? In other words, what does it seem like Trump needs to actually do to effectuate his aims, at least the short-term aims? He needs to rein in Israel. it sounds like he's treating Israel as this unhinged, in many ways it is, monster out of his control. And the way he sells this, Israel is the villain. And he's already signaling that he doesn't want to attack Iran's oil infrastructure. So what is the point of all of this? What are we getting out of it? It is actually insane that what is driving Trump's strategic impulse has to do with his relationships. This is my assessment based on how I know Trump's corruption. His assessment of like whether Qatar and the relationship with the Gulf states is going to be good or not. Like that's what's motivating him to defend, first and foremost, Qatar. Where's the American interest here? Where's the acumen, the strategic acumen? Where's the tactical brilliance? This makes it seem like he has absolutely no idea what he's doing, no control whatsoever. And it's, again, a promise that he won't be able to maintain. No more attacks will be made by Israel. How many times have we heard that? This happened in the 12-Day War, too. And then we get told by Joe Kent and by also Marco Rubio before he took it back that Israel pushed for the war. It's a disaster. It's a complete disaster. So anyone who told you this was about humanitarian shit, benefit of the Iranian people, strategic reasons, nuclear threat, how does this address the nuclear threat issue? How are we going to effectuate regime change? It sounds like we're unwilling to attack the oil infrastructure, etc. So how actually are we going to win this war of attrition and outlast the Iranians when they can escalate just as we can? This proves that Iran, if anything, it proves that Iran has escalation potential. It confirms it because they can more aggressively attack Qatar and Trump will bark. That's where it's painful for him. It is a disgrace. It's such a disgrace, and we're wasting billions of dollars all the time. Every day we're wasting so many resources, transferring them from China, from the sphere, from the Pacific, where they're needed, to bring them here. Meanwhile, Iran is able to control who comes in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. Who fucking planned this? Every tweet is like contradictory. We need help. No, we don't. You know, UK Starmer is like offering some naval assistance. No, we don't need that. They're too late. Oh, actually, we need everybody. We need the Avengers. Even though I've been insulting them every week. I like, for people who are still in favor of this war as conducted with our current leadership in place, I just think that you're totally insane. He's a liar.
And then you do it anyway, and it turns out that person was right. Your first instinct is not to apologize and correct your behavior. Your first instinct is to crush the person who called it correctly. And that's your instinct because, and it's the lowest of all instincts, but it's a human instinct. That's your instinct because his correct prediction is an indictment of you, of course. And it's a way to deflect attacks on you and your own culpability by blaming the guy who told you it was going to happen before you did it. And this is a long-standing fact of human life. And in the last 60 years in this country, it has been the iron law of foreign policy, which is to say, when things go wrong, the only people who get punished are the people who criticized the adventure in the first place. You can imagine General Westmoreland attacking Walter Cronkite of CBS News, whatever you think of Walter Cronkite. In my case, not much. But fundamentally, it was Walter Cronkite sitting very much on the sideline saying, hey, this war's not going well. And there was General Westmoreland prosecuting the war. But General Westmoreland argued till the end of his life, in some ways successfully, that he lost the war because Walter Cronkite criticized the war. Is that really true? How many troops did Walter Cronkite command? Was he in charge of strategy? Don't think so. He was a newsreader in New York. But you can see why Westmoreland did that, why a lot of people believed it, agreed with Westmoreland. You saw the same thing happen in the days after the tragic and incredibly stupid Afghan withdrawal under Joe Biden. That didn't help the United States. Of course, we had to get out of Afghanistan, but the way we did it, who would argue that was a good thing? It was a terrible thing and resulted in the deaths of a lot of Americans. So who was punished for that? As far as we can tell, and we've checked, only one person. And that would be Colonel Stu Scheller of the United States Marine Corps. What was his crime? Planning the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Oh, no. No, Stu Scheller's crime was saying out loud, boy, that didn't work very well, and why'd we do this? And for that, he went to jail. The people who actually did it, who gave the orders, or who carried them out without asking questions about them, which was everybody else, they're fine. You don't even know their names, and they certainly haven't been penalized. So there is a long history, because this is a standing feature of the way people are, that you criticize those who told the truth and who were right, who called it ahead of time. Now, in a functioning society, you get a hold of yourself, and you understand that people are like this, but if you want to be successful as a society, you have to restrain that impulse because it's low and it's counterproductive. And if you silence people who tell the truth, you end up making the same mistakes again and again and again. And maybe that's why we're here at this pivotal point in our war with Iran. So that's the first thing you notice. Joe Kent was right. Therefore, Joe Kent must be destroyed. And there's, of course, this ongoing effort to do that, to dismiss Joe Kent as a tool of the Islamists or a leaker or say he's married to someone who works for Hezbollah or lie after lie after lie. But they're all aimed at Joe Kent, the man, at his motives, at his character, at his personality, at his wife. And that's by design, because none of them touch on his reason for resigning as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Because if you focused on that, you would have to answer his questions. You'd have to answer, is this true? Is what Joe Kent, who possessed highest level intelligence clearances, who was really barred from knowing no secret in the U.S. government since he was one of our top intelligence officials until yesterday, seems like a pretty informed guy. Is what he's saying true? That's the last conversation anyone in Washington wants to have, so just attack him. And you're going to see a lot more of that. The people...
Trump literally said, what did he say? So Trump, let's get the actual quote. Trump, I think he said this in the Oval Office. What did Trump say? It was crazy.
Your director of national... Mr. President, your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you...
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty...
What? So you appointed as your terrorism guru, the terrorism czar, working under Tulsi Gabbard, who you always thought was weak on security. He legit said this. Oh, we want to follow up. Really, Mr. President? You appointed someone who's terrible at security in the counterterrorism advisory position to assess threats on terrorism vis-a-vis security in America. What? The guy is addled, okay? We are living in a crazy situation. It doesn't make sense what he's saying. It doesn't make any sense. I always thought he was weak on security. Very weak on security. It's a good thing he's out. Quote. That's a quote. And now this whole thing about Israel. I mean, he will just confabulate. He'll just make shit up. It's this magical thinking, man.
Who said this war was a bad idea, will be punished. And the more it turns out they were right, which is to say the worse this project goes, the more it becomes obviously counterproductive to American interests, the more vigorously they will be punished, unto and including jail. Stu Scheller.
Oh, absolutely. We're in a Mad King situation. And like we previewed today when we were talking about denaturalization, it's only going to get worse, man. Only going to get worse. Now, ultimately, I think we'll be victorious. I do think that. But it's not going to get prettier. I mean, he's only getting older. He's only getting more isolated and more addled. So this is really, really, really bad. When did you learn he was very weak on security, and why wasn't he fired when you realized that he was very weak on security? Common Good says oil analysts are saying oil could go to 200, 250 a barrel. I hope not. That's crazy. And that will affect, right, everything.
To jail. Probably not the only one who will going forward. So you should just know that and understand what you're seeing in those terms. The second thing that comes immediately to mind when you watch Joe Kent from January of 2024 talk about what would happen if we went to war with Iran is that what he said that day, a year before Donald Trump's inauguration, could have been said by Donald Trump, maybe with a different style. He was making Donald Trump's case, the case that Donald Trump has made for a very long time. Donald Trump, as everybody knows, became the Republican nominee in 2016, 10 years ago, in part because he was the only Republican running for president that year out of a field of nearly 20 people who was willing to say what everyone else knew but was afraid to say, which is the Iraq War didn't help us. It hurt us.
That's why he was elected. I hate this kind of reframing on shit. I don't think that that's why he was elected at all. I think people read into the Rorschach statements he makes. You know, when it's convenient for him to like talk shit about the war, who cares? That was old news for Americans. What they cared about was his position on trade deals, how he talked, he seemed strong and Hillary Clinton seemed weak. They didn't like Hillary Clinton. That kind of shit. Angst from the Great Recession, all that stuff. Feelings of being left behind.
It was a dumb idea and it went on way too long and it became the quagmire that people like Donald Trump
We are all Afro, man. I don't even know anything about the litigation. Is there litigation with him? But good to see you, Ben Riley.
predicted it would be. And the American public, so relieved to hear the truth about something they already knew, made him the Republican nominee despite maybe some concerns. But they did it because, hey, he was right, and he's the only one brave enough to say so. And Donald Trump made varieties of that case for the next 10 years, and in many cases specifically about Iran, because Trump has seen, long before most people in Washington, before almost anyone in Washington, the big picture, the outline, which is this is a contest between the United States in the West and China in the East, a rising power that matches or maybe exceeds our economic power globally, and we have to figure out how to apportion power. And we don't want to get sidetracked with engagements like, I don't know, another endless Middle Eastern war, because in the end, the only winner of that conflict is China. In this specific case. Whoever in the end settles this conflict, whether it's the United States or some other power, whoever comes in at whatever the end of it is and says, enough, this is hurting the world. Each side has made its point, but the global economy has a critical interest in the Persian Gulf. That's energy. And we're going to stop this now. Whoever that person is will become more powerful than ever.
Should I review it? I like some of his music.
And everyone else will become less powerful. The person who settles disputes is in charge. Not the person who starts them, not the person who wins them, the person who stops them. When dad comes home and stops the fighting between brother and sister, who's in charge? Dad, because he stopped the conflict. All of which is to say...
By the way, can we, is it close to Tim Heidecker's fake trial? Wait, no way it's that good. Guys, if you haven't seen the Tim Heidecker fake trial, that shit is absolutely good. Very, 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 very good. If it's close to that. You know, the daddy discourse. Like this shit is, I don't know. What are the words? What are the fucking words?
Say, if at the end of this conflict, it's China that comes in, China, which has a vested interest in what happens in the region since they're a major consumer of Gulf energy. If it's China that comes in and restores the energy flows out of the Persian Gulf and restores some version of peace, gets the fighting to stop, then China is in charge of the Persian Gulf. That's just a fact of nature. And so a lot is at stake, as Joe Kent knew, as Donald Trump knew. And so the question is, how did Donald Trump...
I think people overestimate Trump's like intellectual capacity to think about these conflicts in anything other than base terms. I truly think that they project so much to Trump's like view of the conflict in these geostrategic areas. He's apt to just listen to the last person to give a geostrategy or like a political international strategy take to him and just go with whatever feels good or just go with his gut. It's not like this linear process in his mind. The dude is not that intelligent. He is not that bright. He has a base cunning and kind of intuition that has guided him pretty successfully in life. But it's not this. Again, people want to make this into like this very linear thing where all of a sudden there was a shift. And what happened? Why did he change so much, you know?
Trump, after 10 years of saying one thing, do in the pivotal act of his presidency exactly the opposite. That's not just an academic question. It's not the beginning of a conspiracy theory about some shadowy lobby. It's the most important question we face.
Yeah, when he said, we'll stop when I feel it in my bones, I believe him. It rings true to me when Trump says, yeah, we'll stop when I feel it in my bones. You heard him say that too, right? Right after he said that these people coming into our country have like bad genetics. Right after he did that. Unquestionably racial language. And we have to pretend that we can't talk about racism anymore. Just saying. But yeah, in that conversation, he's like, I feel like that rings true. That's what's going on. Also him being charmed, also corruption, also Israel pushing. But it's not this like thought out machination from Trump. That doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve agency and responsibility and judgment from all of you, and especially those of you who were tricked by him.
Because this is not the first time the United States has entered into this kind of war against the wishes of its own population and in clear contravention of its own interests, against its interests. This isn't good for us. No one has made the case that it's good for us. And increasingly, as the days pass, it becomes obvious to everyone why it's not good for us. And if you don't believe that, then check the prices of food and fuel and everything you buy, because everything you buy is dependent on the price of energy.
It absolutely is. Jerry rig everything. I liked some of this guy's tweets, and he has some good like breakdown tech videos that I've really enjoyed. I got very like emotional watching him discuss about his wife and doing like he has some content with his wife who is in a wheelchair. And I actually found it like a very moving story, Jerry rig everything. But he just tweeted out, Donald Trump doesn't want us to know who actually killed Charlie Kirk. That's why the story has been so quiet. Let that sink in. I'm like scared that more normal lib-coded people are going to be taken in by these insane individuals and spread conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk that are totally unjustified. And he's referencing perhaps something that Joe Kent is about to say here.
And the production of fertilizer, both of which are affected almost immediately by the closure of the Straits of Hormuz.
The suit was basically, is it protected speech to rap about police if they wronged you, or is it defamation? Oh shit, wait, that actually sounds great. I'd love to fucking watch that. Is it state court, so it's filmed or something? Is that why people are tuned into it?
So we did this again. It's not exactly clear how or why we did this, but we need to find out. And there is great resistance to finding out. And you've noticed that in the last 36 hours since Joe Kent resigned as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, one of our top intel officials, because the attacks on him have prevented an honest conversation about what he's actually saying. And what he's saying is, and he says it clearly, and we're going to ask him about it directly in just a moment, Israel got us into this war. Its lobby in the United States pressured the president, and its prime minister in Israel told the president, we're going without you. Join us, because if you don't, your troops in the region, your interests in the region, your citizens in the region will all be at risk. You have no choice. They led the way. That's Joe Kent's position. And rather than push back against that and say, no, actually, he's wrong, they're telling you to shut up. And why are they doing that? Well, there's only one reason people ever become hysterical and slanderous, start screaming at you rather than answering you. It's because they're lying. And the truth is, this is not the first time you've watched people in charge lie. This has been going on a long time. And lies give way to a whole bunch of bad things. More lies. Once you tell a lie, you bolster it with further lying. Hysteria, the fear of being caught lying.
And who's lying, Tucker? Name him. Name him for his works. Who's lying here? Who's the head of the metaphoric snake? Yeah, Tucker's also a liar. It's Trump. And so let's keep an eye on how much they're willing to talk shit about Trump or how much they're willing to treat him like a toddler.
The rage and slander. If the person catches me lying, he wins in the zero-sum game of lying. I die. You go on the attack to cover your lies. And bad judgment. You can't make wise decisions on the basis of lies because they're not true. They're not based in reality. That didn't actually happen. Or in this case, it did happen, but you're pretending it didn't. So a country based on lies, like a family based on lies, like an individual life based on lies, cannot succeed. In fact, it's hellish, as all of us have experienced in our lying. And so the only way out of this is to stop lying. is to tell the truth now, probably 63 years after we should have started telling the truth, but it's never too late to tell the truth now about everything, because it's never as painful as you think it will be. It's actually an act of liberation. In fact, it's the only real act of liberation. Telling the truth sets you free because the truth itself sets you free. That is always and everywhere a fact. And the longer you delay doing that, the more horrible the consequences of your lies. So let's hope that.
And by the way, let's also just keep in mind who these people are, as part of this clique. We'll call them the Israel critical commentator class on the right wing who are against this war, include some of the biggest liars, Tucker himself, on the alleged stolen election, fake election fraud, ignoring the real attempted election fraud of Trump stuffing the electoral ballots, which is absolutely what he tried to do with the fake elector scheme and the fake electoral vote scheme. Candace Owens, who hasn't said a truthful word about so many topics of importance, including assassinations, heads of state. These guys are totally unrepentant liars constantly. It is actually concerning to me if normies or Democrats like fall for their spell. These guys are clowns.
Tonight, with this conversation with Joe Ken, is the beginning of the long overdue truth-telling, which is the only thing that will save this country. And one final note about Joe Ken.
Yeah, like who won the 2020 election, Tucker?
Who I spent the last 24 hours with. Joe Ken's
You spent 24 hours with Joe Ken afterwards. So this feels like an op. I don't know. Like this feels like they planned it. They coordinated it.
resume hardly needs explanation because everyone is aware this is a man who deployed on 11 combat missions to the global war on terror. This is sort of the perfect representation of the GWAT generation. This is one of those guys we often celebrate, but too rarely hear from, who we sent out to fight the so-called war on terror that began on 9/11. And it's an entire generation of men who look and sound, for the most part, very much like Joe Kent. So the implication, of course, he doesn't care about security or he's soft on Iran. Joe Kent spent, well, the
No, I don't think the Dems are fucked if Tucker
majority of his 20s and 30s fighting Iranian proxies.
I have no reason to believe that.
And watching his friends get killed by them. So this is someone who's actually earned the right to speak about Iran and the war on terror. And of course, he was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. So he's thought a lot about terrorism in this country and the blowback from events like this. And we're going to ask him about that as well. But the other thing to notice about Joe Kent, and it may be his defining factor, is that he doesn't slander anyone. His resignation letter was not an attack on Donald Trump. It wasn't a promise.
And it should have been. And it should have been. That's a problem. Right? Because Israel. Who's launching this operation? That's actually bad. It means you're lying by omission.
Must write a tell-all memoir about what he saw on the inside or to aggrandize himself or to get a
That's absolutely what it
job
was.
on a TV show or sell something. I asked him at dinner last night, what are your plans? None. He did this purely because he believes, as he'll explain in a second, this is the only way to save the United States from certain disaster. Tell the truth. Air the secrets. Be honest
trust
for
these
once
people.
in
Don't trust these people on anything.
decades about what is actually happening. Things that everybody who lives here suspects are happening. In some cases, we're probably wrong. We've come to the wrong conclusions. That's okay. Tell us what actually happened. Tell us why you did this. And let's reorient this country where it should be, which is around its own citizens. Make the decisions that you make based on one criterion. Is this good for my people or not? In the way that a father would lead his family or an officer would lead his troops. It's not complicated. Everybody wants that. That's not a partisan question. That's a human question. And that's the question Joe Kent is posing. Why can't we do this? Why can't we say this is not an attack on anybody? Joe Kent himself does not attack anybody. But this is a last-ditch attempt, not simply to save the country from disaster in Iran, but to save the country, period. And as you listen to him speak, ask yourself, is this a man who's working for Hezbollah or is an egomaniac or a leaker? Or is this a man who says very little when he has nothing to say, who speaks straightforwardly and with honesty, self-evident honesty?
Self-evident
Is this a man of dignity?
So it's self-evident that he's honest. In other words, you don't need to consider whether he's honest. So self-evidently honest. Actually, this guy seems like a liar. This guy seems like a phony. This guy seems like he is willing to say anything to get power. That's what it seems like to me. Just like you, Tucker, when you were one of the biggest cheerleaders for the wars under George Bush, and you change your tune. You're willing to say whatever it actually took to stay in power at Fox News. We know that from the Dominion lawsuits. We know that from the Dominion lawsuits. We know what you were willing to say. And so I actually won't take your kind of preempting, your kind of trying to frame Joe Kent as self-evidently honest before we get to see what he has to say. Since I don't think you're a good judge of honesty because you're not an exemplar of it yourself. I think that you're a shameless liar.
And decency. Is this a man that America once had a lot of? Is this a man who was once, in effect,
the glaze is insane?
The American archetype, the guy you looked up to, the guy you wanted your son to be? Whether you agree with him or not, maybe you're reaching completely different conclusions. But as you listen to him speak, ask yourself, is this the kind of person who makes me proud to be a fellow American? Because it's really a referendum on us. If we can't see that Joe Kent, whatever you think of his opinions, is the kind of man this country should be producing and should be elevating and should be proud of, if we can't see that, then we've failed the test and we've lost. But judge it for yourself. Here's Joe Kent. Joe, thanks a lot for joining us.
What is with this like whole rustic thing? So he totally rebrands himself, goes from the dorky bow tie to filming in his house, and it's like at a fucking cabin.
I appreciate this. So I want to go through the letter that you sent yesterday as you resigned as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. And basically through the big points and give you a chance to explain them. You've been spoken for quite a bit over the last 24 hours. So I think it'd be really helpful to all of us if you would speak for yourself and flesh out some of these points. I'm just going to read the first one. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. How did you reach that conclusion?
I think this is key. I mean, this would be more challenging to explain had the Secretary of State, the President, and the Speaker of the House not come out and said that we conducted this attack at this time because the Israelis were about to do so. So that takes away the argument that there was an imminent threat, as in Iran was planning to attack us.
So you're just relying on the same statements that everyone else is relying on, the public statements. Now, not to say that you shouldn't rely on those or your comments, but like there's no specific additional information that you were given access to. This kind of makes me feel like he was iced out of meetings and shit. This guy, he's given a position. It's a senior position, but it's kind of like whatever. It's not like he is the actual director of national intelligence or anything like that. It almost makes it seem like if he doesn't have any additional information to base that conclusion on, that he's running the same sort of analysis that the rest of the public is. In which case, like, is it that, you might think that someone coming out and be like, this is all for Israel with inside knowledge, you listen to them more. But if you're just relying on the public statements, I don't know, man. We'll see.
Immediately. That just simply did not exist.
May I ask you to pause? Sure. And so I've heard people say that, and this just happened, but history has a way of getting rewritten in real time. And then you look back 10 or 15, 20, 25 years later, and no one seems to understand the things that you saw because they've been eliminated. Yeah. So I think it's important to stop and say, here's what we actually...
That's another possibility, dubious gal, but also note that there's public reporting that now he's being investigated for leaking. So maybe he has more, and maybe the reason why he's relying on that is because of the or because he doesn't want to be accused of it. But if that's the case, it didn't really stop there from being an investigation.
No, so I'd like now.
Possibly has additional. No, I mean, I guess that's true. I just he's not alleging, so far he's not alleged inside information other than what we know to be the fact, right? So it's notable, obviously, that an administration official is coming out and saying this, but just keep in mind, you might weigh it differently given what the base of his conclusion is, or alleged basis.
Now, if we could, just to play one of the statements that you alluded to, and that's from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and this was shortly after this war commenced, and he was explaining, as this has happened, in a thoughtful, precise way, why. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Okay, so that is his almost contemporaneous explanation, and it's not offhand. He reasons it out. He explains there's a logic chain there, and he says, we knew not that Iran was going to attack. He did not say that.
Right.
He said we knew that Israel was going to attack Iran, and in retaliation for those attacks by Israel against Iran, Iran might attack American forces. So the imminent threat that the Secretary of State is describing is not from Iran, it's from Israel.
Exactly. And I think this speaks to the broader issue. Who is in charge of our policy in the Middle East? Who's in charge of when we decide to go to war or not? In this case, with what the Secretary described.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The American people, in their infinite wisdom, made a decision. Who's running our foreign policy? You know who's running our foreign policy. That wasn't a question when we were bombing ships in the middle of the Caribbean. That wasn't a question when we were engaged in this tariff war. Who's running the foreign policy? Who's negotiating with these other countries? We know exactly who's running American foreign policy. So this Jew baiting that they're doing, this Zog posting they're doing, they're just deflecting. It is a calculated strategy to not piss off an audience of people who like Trump and who are loyal to Trump, a lot of them, and to try to put it on the Jews and only the Jews, right? That's what they're doing. That's obviously what they're doing. And it's a way of sweeping not just for Trump, for themselves. You actually do have complicity, Tucker and Joe Kent supporting this madman for president. You actually have that complicity. And it's obvious. It's obvious why they're doing this. It's to maximize their political leverage and to create a lane for themselves politically in their career. That's what is going on here. Who's running foreign policy for America? It's Trump. It's the dipshit that you promoted, that you supported against Kamala. That's who's running our policy.
Described, and later on the president, later on the Speaker of the House, and the way the events played out, the Israelis drove the decision to take this action, which we knew would set off a series of events, meaning the Iranians would retaliate. Now, I think there's a potential there where we could have done several different things. We could have simply said to the Israelis, no, you will not.
We could have said it. Not me. Not me, not you, chatter. Not we. No. Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, the principals. Them. Not we. Them. You, Kent. You, Tucker.
And if you do, then we will take something away from you. I think that it's fine that we offer defense to Israel, but when we're providing the means for their defense, we get to dictate the terms of when they go on the offensive. Otherwise, they stand to lose that relationship. And the Israelis felt emboldened that no matter what they did, no matter what situation they put us in, that they could go ahead and take this action, and we would just.
And we, you can already tell by their word choice. They're so careful. I don't know. Maybe they'll address it. Maybe they'll address the giant orange elephant in the room.
Just have to react. And so that speaks to that relationship. But also it just shows that there was a lobby pushing for us to go to war. I know we'll get into that later on.
A lobby pushing us. A lobby pushing Trump. He looks like handsome Squidward. Be the shark you want to see in the world.
In the statement, but we had a real potential, I think, knowing what we know of the Iranians and how they react, and in particular, how they react to President Trump's leadership. The Iranians, under President Trump's leadership, especially in his second term, they have shown that they take a very calculated approach to the escalation ladder. For instance, in the lead up to the 12-day war before Midnight Hammer, the Iranians didn't attack us. They were engaged in negotiations with us. When President Trump came back into office, they stopped their proxies who were attacking us under the Biden administration because they knew Biden was weak. They stopped their proxies from attacking us as well. So they knew President Trump was someone who wanted to negotiate, but more importantly, they knew that President.
So make that make sense, right? So Joe Biden is weak. That's why this war happened under Trump. Like, how does that even make sense? I mean, like, let's just try to follow the logic here. Who was the corrupt asshole who launched this war? Was it Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
Back into office, they stopped.
So they have no compunction about calling out presidents.
Lead up to the 12-day war before Midnight Hammer, the Iranians didn't attack us. They were engaged in negotiations with us. When President Trump came back into office, they stopped their proxies who were attacking us under the Biden administration because they knew Biden was weak. They stopped their proxies from attacking us as well. So they knew President Trump was someone who wanted to negotiate, but more importantly, they knew that President Trump was not someone to mess with because he killed Qasem Soleimani. He killed Abu Mahdi Mohandas. He had defeated ISIS. They knew that President Trump was a man of action. He is militarily strong. And so they said, before we take an action, we need to make sure that it's calculated. So
I don't know if Joe Kent is just like low IQ and he missed. Okay, the proxies all stopped. The proxies all stopped under Trump because they didn't want to fuck with Trump. Okay, if that's your vision of strength, by the way, even assuming that's the chronology here. The chronology actually is that Joe Biden delivered on a peace deal or at least a temporary ceasefire, I should say, not a permanent peace deal. And of course, Witkoff and this asshole Trump take full credit for it. But there hasn't really been a total end to the conflict this entire time. And Joe Biden was, some might say, working in concert with the Iranians to stop Israel from creating this into a larger regional war, on your own view, Joe Kent. And so who was stronger, and against whom were they stronger? Joe Biden seems like he was stronger against Israel, and it seems like Donald Trump is weak against Israel. And so where is this calculation of strength and weakness, and why aren't you willing to acknowledge, if it's true that Joe Biden was unable to reign in Iran, why is Trump unable to reign in Israel? What's the true measure of strength and weakness in the conduct of this conflict?
I think in this scenario, even if the Israelis told us we're going to strike on this date at this time, and we didn't, try to negotiate with the Israelis and say, hey, we'll take something away from them, I think we still could have back-channeled to the Iranians and said, hey, if something happens here in the next couple of days, it's not us. We're still serious about negotiations, and we don't want to escalate this, because it's well known what the Iranians' plans were. We knew that they were going to hit potentially our bases in the region, potentially our allies. We knew about the Straits of Hormuz. All of these things, I think, were fairly well known.
And the Houthis' ability to close the Red Sea, which they've not yet done, but which would be catastrophic to the world.
Everybody knows somebody who has had an unexpected tragedy. You lose a parent, a spouse, and that person, to compound the tragedy, didn't have life payment full. Shouldn't prosecuting family
more so people could. So, but for the purpose of explaining your position or fleshing it out more so people can understand it, because this is your most high-profile resignation by far in a long time, and there's a lot of commentary on this, and
I love that no one gives a shit that Kristi Noem resigned. By the way, she should be prosecuted. Have you seen the stories about the money that was absolutely used for her own personal political benefit, and the conflicts of interest in the bidding process for some of these vendors? It is an insane, there's even reporting that Corey Lewandowski said, Trump will just pardon us. We can do whatever we want. They're so fucking brazen. But yeah, no, it is funny to me that no one in MAGA movement is at all plussed about, they're incredibly nonplussed about the resignation of Kristi Noem at DHS.
A quick trip through it this afternoon, and one of the consistent themes as well, of course there's a lot of slander, which we can talk about, but the substantive attack on you, and it is an attack or refutation of your letter, is that, well, actually, Joe Kent was totally for using military action. He supported the Soleimani killing, for example. He seemed fine with the 12-day war, for example. So he doesn't have a problem on principle with an engagement with Iran. You're saying what to that? What's your response?
Well, I have no compunction about really fighting anybody who threatens our country, and the Iranians have posed a threat in the past, and the Iranians have a way of threatening America. They have the capability. And we always talk in the intelligence circles about capability and intent, what your enemy is capable of doing and what they actually want to do. And again, back to the data that we have on the Iranians, they used the escalation ladder. We saw that deliberately during the 12-day war. When they struck back after Midnight Hammer, it was very deliberate. They fired an equal amount of missiles as we dropped bombs on the nuclear facilities, and they basically hit a part of a base in Qatar that they knew we didn't have any troops on.
Yes. They
didn't want to escalate any further than we were willing to go. But also, the Iranians, when they pose a threat to us, they usually do it with their proxies. And if their proxies stick their heads up and their proxies come after us, this is basically the Trump doctrine. We hammer them, and we hammer their high-profile leaders. Qasem Soleimani was highly effective and highly revered in
Yeah, he's not a proxy. That's a member of the IRGC.
Iran, because the previous presidents, prior to President Trump, Obama and Bush, let Qasem Soleimani run around, raise proxy armies, kill Americans, and no one ever did anything to him. President Trump rightfully killed Qasem Soleimani. We got his deputy, Abu Mahdi Mohandas, who had American blood in his hands, took them off the battlefield. But then President Trump stopped. He took those two key players off the battlefield, and he said, I'm not going to further escalate with Iran unless you escalate with us, knowing that if we struck Iran and we truly struck the regime, that...
So understand how Joe Kent is painting this. Joe Kent is painting the initial strikes against Qasem Soleimani and the policy of the Trump administration the first term vis-a-vis Israel and Iran as all good. That's the good policy. That's the America First policy. That's the policy of the détente with Iran, I guess, or of the smart policy in Iran. I would counter that the proper way to view that is serial and escalating. That is to say, the tensions with Iran are rising as a result of the first Trump administration. We're getting closer and closer to war. And that this action in the 12-day war is not a break from a policy of, mowing the grass or whatever the terminology is, but it is the next logical step in a chain of escalation where the first Trump term obviously serves as an attempt by Trump to strengthen Israel, to turn over the embassy and make it in Jerusalem, to do the Abraham Accords, to rip up the Iran nuclear deal, among other things, right? Is it a meme, or do you not know that you're using non-plus in the opposite way? It's a meme.
Would only strengthen the regime. So then President Trump did something that's incredibly smart, used that decisive military action, but then he coupled it with an economic package of sanctions, maximum pressure sanctions. And we can debate whether or not we should be using sanctions as the prime reserve currency.
Should we debate that? Should we debate that? It sounds like all of this is escalatory. All of this is leading to a conflict.
Or whatever, but he pressured the Iranians economically after punching them in the mouth and showing, hey, I won't take this. I'm not Obama. I'm not Bush. If you cross a line, I will come after you. But then he really put the pressure on them economically. And if you look at the effect of the economic sanctions, that's what got the...
And of course, that's what got the Iranians to do what? To further enrich uranium, to further be sort of ostracized from any potential negotiation. What did it get them to do? What was the benefit?
Iranian people on the streets actually protesting against the Ayatollah's government, which is ostensibly what we would like. We would like to see a bottom-up regime change where we get rid of the Ayatollah, but it's the will of the people, and they have a new successful government that's stable that we can deal with. The one way to throw that all out the window, and this isn't just Joe Kent's opinion, many scholars, and I think a lot of intelligence assessments have been written about this too, I know for a fact they have, is that if we struck the regime, it would only strengthen it. And that's not... I think that's just basic common sense. I mean, I think of myself, and probably you're in this camp as well. We didn't like Joe Biden. We didn't like Barack Obama. But if an outside force were to come in here and try and topple them while they were the president, I would 100% rally around the flag.
Would you?
That's just
would you? What about an inside force that tries to topple the democratically elected government of Joe Biden? An inside force like your buddy and pal that you push forward. You guys have no loyalty to the United States. You guys are scum of the earth. And now you see a potential avenue for yourself. And so that's what you're doing. You have no loyalty to process or to the United States Constitution.
Common sense. So if we wanted to strengthen,
well, you actually did. You just joined the military under Bill Clinton,
under Clinton,
whom I assume you didn't vote for.
Right.
Right. You joined in 1998. You've gone the whole cycle of the war on terror, I noticed, and served out as an NCO. I think your entire
NCO and warrant officer.
Yeah, warrant officer, 20 years. And I should
this
just
guy tried to overthrow our democracy. He doesn't give a shit about you. He doesn't give a shit about the American people, let alone the Iranian people, let alone anyone but himself. And maybe as a secondary matter, Tucker and JD and all these.
I hate ever to refer to a man's resume as like a data point because your ideas exist separately. But in this specific case, meaning you spent most of your time fighting Iranian proxies.
Yeah, a good deal of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're aware of the threat from Iran. You have personally used violence against that threat.
I have.
Yeah, a lot of it, I think. And you supported the president's policy up until fairly recently.
Right.
And you've said that a lot in public. In fact, you went to work for him. He hired you.
Yeah.
Right. But here's from what I can tell, is the central question: imminent threat. Now, the president has said many times to many people, including
Iran
the public,
will not get a nuclear weapon.
Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he must have said that to you. You don't have to say it, but he said it to everybody. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. They can't have a nuke. Whenever asked, we say, let's just start here. They can't have a nuke. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Everyone agreed with that conceptually. Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either. I mean, the Iranians have had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against actually developing a nuclear weapon since 2004. That's been in place since 2004. That's available in the public sphere. But then also we had no intelligence to indicate that fatwa was being disobeyed or it was on the cusp of being lifted. The Iranian strategy, it's actually pretty pragmatic. The Iranians are...
Yeah, they want to make it so that they're close, right? That they... that kind of ambiguity, right? That's serving them strategically.
Obviously aware of what's taking place in their region, and their strategy was to not completely abandon their nuclear program because they saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya when he said, hey, I've got no more nukes. I'll do what you say. I'll give up my nukes.
And we gave him the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, we regime changed him, and he was executed by his own people in the most horrific way.
Sodomized by a bayonet, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson I think that the entire region took from that when Hillary Clinton.
Unfortunately, that is what the neocon, neoliberal warmongers, that's the lesson that they showed everyone in the region.
Like you and Tucker? And
then conversely, the Iranians also knew that if they came out and said, okay, we've got a nuke, whether they were bluffing or not, Saddam Hussein, Iraq right next door. So they kind of had this.
And he hung, I think.
He was hung by his own people, after a bloody, war that's still essentially going on inside of Iraq. So the Iranians' position, when viewed from the lens of the region, was actually fairly pragmatic. They were preventing themselves from developing a bomb, but they still wanted the ability. They wanted the ability to enrich. They wanted the ability to have some components so that they weren't completely stripped of it. And we always assessed that they were either several months or a year, 2 years away from actually being able to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's not because the Iranians are stupid people. I think we can tell right now that the Iranians are anything but stupid. They had the ability, I think, that the brain power to actually develop one, or they could have simply traded a ton of oil with Pakistan or with someone else to actually get a nuclear weapon. They were not doing.
True. The Tulsi tweet is like, I serve the president. The president has this job. I have this job. I serve at the president. The president did this. It's like she's being tortured or something into writing this tweet that will please nobody.
Doing that, we had no intelligence to indicate that they were.
Then why was the president, was he told that they were on the brink of it? Why at the beginning of every conversation about Iran with the president?
He's a liar. He's a fucking liar. He's a liar. They lied about WMDs in Iraq. You all cheerleaded that war effort, and they're lying now. Why would he say that? Why would he say this? Dude, well, are these the most... No, they're not the most naive people of all time, right? You have to remember, this is a pantomime. They know. This is all deception. This is all an act. This rustic cabin in the woods in Maine or whatever.
President say, I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Why was that the central question when, and you would know since you were the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, why would he say that if there was no intelligence?
Why would he say that? Why would you do that?
Or evidence that they were actually developing a nuke.
So a couple things. This is what I talk about in the letter about this ecosystem of information that's laundered through a lot of prominent neoconservative types that are very sympathetic to the Israeli cause, and then also Israeli government officials who give us things in semi-official channels. What they did was they created basically a shifting red line or a new red line. So if the president's red line was Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, we've actually got a lot of trade space in there for a deal to be made. Because of what I just described with the Iranian policy. Essentially, the Iranians saying, okay, well, we don't want a nuclear weapon. Well, that means we basically are at a point where we can start negotiating.
A deal? Why don't we give a name for this deal, all right? We'll have a new deal, and this is what we'll call it, the joint total plan of action. And then maybe we can just refer to it as the Iran nuclear deal or something like that. As a way to try to make sure that they don't get nuclear weapons, and maybe if at some point we can renegotiate that deal, why don't we do that? And this guy can we get an explanation? Why did you not support the Iran nuclear deal? Because they have to maintain this position. They have to in order to have their credibility, they have to shit on Democrats, and they have to explain that, Obama bad, Biden bad, Trump good, Trump policy bad. So it actually would be interesting for me to hear, well, did Obama do a good thing with the Iran nuclear deal? But these guys would be loath to praise Biden, loath to praise Democrats in any respect. And so they're having this facade of, he had a red line and there's actually a lot of space there. And so eventually it's going to be like, okay, well, his line kept shifting and they shifted it. They shifted the line as though the decision to shift the line, whatever this metaphor is, was like their discretion to do. We have Donald Trump. I want to reemphasize, we talked about this the other day. Trump is relying on Mark Levin and Laura Loomer and immediately calling Laura Loomer this insane person after these strikes. Laura Loomer. Our country is being run by clowns. And these guys want to be the next leaders of what will be left of the Republican movement.
We can come up with a deal, and the president is a fantastic deal maker. So if your goal is to move us away from any kind of deal, and your goal is to move us into a conflict, you have to shift that red line. And that's where a lot of this, I would say,
it's all passive language. You have to shift that red line. It's all like not direct to Who would be doing the shifting?
Became a de facto U.S. policy of Iran can have no nuclear enrichment. It was laundered through a lot of the different talking heads, Mark Levin, Mark Dubowitz. You've got the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. You name it. Washington, D.C. has plenty of pro-Israeli lobbyists who will come and say those things, who will publish think pieces on it, who will go on the media, who will run op-eds in the Wall Street Journal to talk about this, why they can't have any enrichment whatsoever. And then we have a high degree of engagement with Israeli government officials who will come in and say, well, they're enriching and they could enrich, or they could enrich more, and that will get them closer to a nuclear weapon. So then enrichment basically became the new U.S. policy. And the only official I've heard, and folks are welcome to look for this, that said this in the first Trump administration was Mike Pompeo. He said it. The president didn't say it. The president has been very consistent.
The president has been very consistent in his bellicose rhetoric and policy against Iran. That's what he's been consistent of. Oh, you mean Mike Pompeo? You mean Mike Pompeo, the CIA director appointed by Trump, and then Secretary of State appointed by Trump? That Mike Pompeo? I'm telling you, it is brazen that any left-wing person would just credulously give these guys any benefit of the doubt. Yeah, Mike Pompeo. You mean Trump's friend, Mike Pompeo? Who he appointed as Secretary of State? That Mike Pompeo? What, you mean Marco Rubio, who's laundering it? Marco Rubio, the appointed Secretary of State of Trump?
He said they can't have a nuclear weapon. But again, like I said, that puts us at a place where we actually could have negotiations. And only President Trump.
I've talked a lot of shit about Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. I would take 1,000 Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez's over this disgusting creature. Yeah, I know he has a chiseled jaw, okay? But what a disgusting scumfuck.
I think could successfully have negotiations with Iran because he actually punched them in the face. And the Iranians had been walking all over us. They've been killing our soldiers. All of that is true. I have no sympathy whatsoever for the Iranians, what their proxies were doing. President Trump level set that when he killed Qasem Soleimani and he killed Abu Mahdi Mohandas. The folks who wanted to push an actual regime change war in Iran knew this, and they knew there was a potential to get a deal, or there was a potential for President Trump just to continue the policy of maximum pressure sanctions. And if you come after us, we will hit you hard. And that got the protesters out on the street in Iran. And that's actually what the regime.
Oh, yeah? Then why did he lose to Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez twice in 2022 and 2024? For every person like you who would take Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, concentration camp Perez, there's 1,000 normies who would take this guy. Oh, yeah, that's why Joe Kent lost both actual elections that took place in the last 2 cycles. Or did you know about that? Because he didn't have any notoriety then. Oh, okay, yeah.
Feared the most.
Always an excuse, right? These lefties. These fucking lefties.
I don't think.
Not all of you, right?
The Ayatollah feared dying, not because he, is some crazy lunatic. I'm sure some degree of the Shia martyrdom.
He's in a Trump district, you ding dong. He's in a Trump +9 district. This was a district that went like +5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for Trump. And they will do anything, right? Even when it's staring you in the face, they will do anything to shit on liberals. These disgusting, not all of them, these disgusting lefties will do anything to shit on Dems. Even to glaze this fucker, Joe Kent. This fucker who promoted Trump, who's lying to the American people right now, who was a hawk, a neocon. They'll just forget all about that because of this fixation on Israel. It's right there in front of you.
Played a factor in that. However,
even if, and I even started that by saying I shit on Gluesenkamp-Perez on a bunch of stuff. They don't care.
I think he knew that if he was killed, the regime would survive because the people would rally around the regime.
Well, there's been a lot of noise in the news lately, but none of it matters if you can't hear it. So the states vote for and I'm willing to hear on that. It's the system.
I think we're watching. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what we're watching, but it seems consistent with what we are watching. So I'm just focused on this question of imminent threat because that's really the only justification I think most Americans would accept for a preemptive war.
Certainly.
Otherwise, just like a war of trades done because Bibi told you to, and no one wants to get behind that because it's obviously illegitimate. So imminent threat. You're saying that there was no intelligence that you saw with the highest level clearance, obviously involved in this conversation, that showed an imminent threat from Iran to the United States. No.
It's not lefty hate screaming. It rubs me the wrong way when people just say something for which they have no evidence. zero evidence that this is going to cause Joe Kent to be more, if he tried, competitive after getting Trump mad at him. Do you understand that the Trump base supports Trump? Because it's all premised on this notion that the right-wing populist base or independents are both collectively in favor, I'll at least start with the Republicans first, that the Republicans in a primary context would fuck with Joe Kent right now in the Trump era. They would not. They absolutely would not, because they're all in line. The people are in line. CNN releases a poll. I mentioned this on my Twitter. We had a little back and forth about it. 100% approval among MAGA. This is all like getting ready for the future. But there's no evidence to suggest that he would be more competitive after this. And certainly with independents. What's the evidence of that? The lefty part, because I know that guy's a lefty, and it just will take any opportunity to shit on liberals. Yesterday he said, I fucking hate liberals. Liberals are worse. They're awful. So that's why it's lefty focus on lefties like this idiot. Where you have no evidence. You have no evidence whatsoever for your claim. For you, it's just vibe.
No, unless we took certain actions, unless we came after them in a way that they thought threatened the regime, then we basically knew what they were going to do.
Well, okay, but then, right, of course.
Right, but like any country. So if you attack any country, we know that they're going to have a reaction.
We face an imminent threat once we attack you.
Yeah, exactly. But there was no intelligence that said.
True, yes. The people who support Trump are cultists. They're cultists.
Hey,
how about some polling data? Oh, polling data that suggests what? That suggests what?
On whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians. They're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder. And again, they're only deliberate under President Trump's leadership because they knew and they took President Trump very, very seriously.
So, I mean, I just think it's a remarkable thing to nail down because you're not some guy on Twitter.
Show me the evidence that Tucker appeals to liberals. Where is that evidence? Where's the evidence that Tucker Carlson appeals to liberals? What evidence do you have of that? Fox News, Tucker Carlson. Where's that shown? Multiple people I know. Okay, I guess I can't debunk that. People you know. Got it.
You're a senior, as of yesterday, you were a senior U.S. Intelligence official who's not hostile to President Trump, who's not going to here to write a solo book or launch a media career. So I think you're a sober voice on this. And just to be clear, there was no intelligence that showed imminent threat. There was no intelligence that showed they were on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence, indeed, that showed they were trying to build a nuclear weapon. And nobody you know said, oh, I've seen it, but you haven't. It exists, but you just haven't seen it. Did you ever hear anybody say there is intel that shows that?
Uh-oh. Right? So now Kent is being asked to disclose conversations that did or did not occur with him.
I did not know,
and he answered.
But I know how this works. I know the Israeli officials, some in intelligence, some in government, will come to U.S. government officials, and they will say all kinds of things that we know from our intelligence just simply isn't true. And they'll say, hey, I'm giving you a preview. It's not in intelligence channels yet, but here's what's going to happen. And that doesn't usually come to
Wait a second. I mean, I thought that U.S. policymakers made their decisions on the basis of intelligence collected and or vetted by our.
Oh, I know that there are some lefties glazing Tucker, but the claim about whether or not in general liberals support Tucker, that's like, yeah, there are liberals and lefties glazing Tucker. You know, the ones that I most see glazing Tucker, it's people like Cenk Uygur. It's those people. And it's not like the mainstream left organizations who all despise Tucker, including myself. Yeah, no, I'm not sorry. I'm just addressing that one lefty and people who think like him. In general, I think people like Kyle Kalinske, they get it right? They get it right when they say things like they're right on discrete issues for the wrong reasons. For example, he'll say things like the right course of action, the right reason to be critical of this fucking mess, this quagmire, this disaster is not anti-Semitism framework, which I appreciate. But he never goes all the way to glaze to the level of someone like TYT. And even, even people who are quite critical of Israel. I think they might appreciate what Tucker's saying, but I don't think that translates to like the voter impact model that this guy was trying to suggest, that Democrats will vote for Tucker. I think they'll vote for the Democrat, actually.
Or intelligence. That's why we have intelligence agencies that soak up hundreds of billions a year. But you're saying that Israeli officials short-circuited the entire U.S. government and just went right to American policymakers and said, it doesn't matter what your country says, here's what we know. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, usually they're pretty slick, and they'll,
of course.
and they'll say, "Hey, this isn't in intelligence channels yet because it's going to take some time to get there." And here they're on the cusp of building a bomb. You know, they're going to, I don't know, you pick your topic. A lot of times they'll sample different things until they find what sticks. But in general, the narrative about, you know, they're going to do a preemptive attack, or really just they're going to build a nuclear weapon, and if we don't stop them now, they're going to build.
So this is someone working directly under Tulsi Gabbard, who, again, maybe he was iced out of conversations. We don't know. There's still a lot more to this story. But here's where there's some usefulness to this entire conversation. He is confirming he never heard anything at his position, which, again, serving directly under the Office of Director of National Intelligence under Tulsi Gabbard. He did not hear a single thing that would cause him to think that they were either an imminent threat or a nuclear intent, nuclear weapon nation. That they were continuing to have this approach. In fact, and he cited the fatwa of the Supreme Leader. So what does that tell us? Well, it confirms what we already knew, that the government is lying to you. The animals are leaving. You guys know that clip? It's the invader clip. Fuck, now I want to find it.
The nuclear weapon, and enrichment is the pathway to that. They're going to continue enriching at whatever percent. Enrichment became the narrative, and so that hung up and that short-circuited and really sabotaged the entire negotiations, because the Iranians basically said, like, we're not going to negotiate if the whole starting point is no enrichment. And again, that had nothing to do with a nuclear weapon, and the Iranians essentially agreed to that. So the Israelis came in, they moved that red line, and they would do a lot to say, like, oh, they're enriching, and you know what that means? That means in X amount of time they could have a nuclear bomb. You have to ask now. And then the way the ecosystem would work is that the talking heads on TV, you know, your Mark Levin's, Sean Hannity's, et cetera, they would say basically the exact same thing that night on TV, or there would be a piece written in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, that would say something very, very similar. Yet, if you looked in classified intelligence, we didn't see any of that.
I mean, that must have been such a weird experience for you.
Bizarre.
Since you have access to the biggest and most powerful and presumably the best intel agencies in the world, and you're seeing people say things as fact when you know that they're not facts.
Right.
What was that like?
Infuriating. And I think that's why, in general, in the lead up to this last iteration, a good deal of key decision makers were not allowed to come express their opinion to the president.
Not allowed by whom?
I think it's important for me right now to stay on the facts. I don't want to point names. I don't want this to become a name calling, or this guy did this on this day.
But any leader has gatekeepers, and so you're saying that you were prevented from bringing this information directly to the president by gatekeepers.
Well, there wasn't a robust debate. So in general, because our assessment really hadn't changed, we would send those up through intelligence.
There's no debate because the policy assessment hasn't changed. The policy assessment hasn't changed. There's not really a debate about this. This is all coming out of deliberations of the president. This is all coming out of his communications with Israelis. Where is this coming from with respect to American intelligence? What are the American insiders saying? Who's in control?
Intelligence channels, everybody's kind of reading the same intelligence, but then what actually gets briefed to the president can be very, very different depending on who and how it's delivered. And without a level set from the intelligence community, someone like DNI Gabbard coming in and saying, Mr. President, like, here's the full scope of the intelligence.
Gabbard, who's standing by Trump with the hostage statement? What's Gabbard going to do? Trump threw Gabbard under the bus. Do you guys remember this? Publicly threw under the bus. This is the worst kind of cope. Oh, you just need Gabbard to come in and save the day. Gabbard is nothing. Gabbard has no influence. What is Gabbard going to do?
And what it means.
It's like, please convince him, please. The problem is Trump.
You're kind of lacking that sanity check of where we're at, or at least a good sampling, to gauge how accurate what the Israelis are saying is. And that process, in my view.
Gabbard literally sold T-shirts that said no war with Iran. Gabbard has no influence. Do you know what Gabbard is? Gabbard is a throwing a bone to idiots. It's cover for stupid morons and naive idiots who believed any of that rhetoric during the campaign. They don't give a fuck what she says. Do you ever see her answer congressional testimony? It's embarrassing. She's there as a token hire for the anti-war coalition. And that's it. They don't give a shit what she says. And neither do I.
Was largely stifled in the second iteration. There was robust debate and robust discussions leading up to the 12-day war into Midnight Hammer. But the second round, to me, and I'm sure others will refute this and disagree with me, but what was conducted by just a handful of advisors around the president.
That is true. I believe what you're saying is true. My sense, though, and you would know more than I, is there weren't a lot of people directly around the president who work there, who work at the White House, the principals, who are making an aggressive case for this war. Do you think there was, was there a majority of like his top 10 advisors who were saying we must do this now?
So now you're going to disclose what the top advisors are saying? You're going to disclose the internal comms. I mean, be careful, man.
I think the circle that was around him was very, very tight and very small.
Hey, why don't you give us any information and clarity? Why don't you name the actors who are pushing for war within the administration? If this is all to defend the American people, why not go all the way? Why not risk a little bit more than what you're risking right now? Why not burn a couple of bridges? This is all for the greater good. Why not be a little bit spicier than you're being right now?
And I think they were all on the same sheet of music. And I think a lot of them were getting their information.
What a nothing statement. What about the principals? I think they were a small group of people. I'm not going to say who they are. Like, nothing statement.
From the ecosystem that I described. And I think we'd be in a different place if we would have talked about the actual, what the intelligence picture is and what our interest is.
So Israeli government talking points laundered through Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, is that the ecosystem you're talking about?
Yeah, and then the Israeli officials coming in and basically either ahead of time or after the fact saying the same thing. Like
That's like really, really, really bad, okay? That's like really, really bad. You talking to a mirror? Could say the same about me. In what respect, Charlie? In what respect? Is this like Israel cope? Oh, you're unwilling to talk shit about Israel? No, fuck Israel. Israel has a key, necessary role here. But this is sweeping. This is sweeping for Trump. And is like being beguiled by Israelis. No, the guy's corrupt. He's a weak-minded fool. I ain't a Charlie burner. I ain't a Charlie burner. These guys are just Jew baiting because they'd rather do that than actually deal with the facts that their guy's a crook. They push the crook.
Enrichment is going to get them a nuclear bomb in set amount of time.
Do you believe that you and the DNI, for whom you worked until yesterday, had as much FaceTime with the president as Israeli officials did?
I don't know. I don't know that for sure because I don't know exactly how frequently the Israelis were engaging directly with the president. It did seem like Benjamin Netanyahu was, obviously that was all public that he was.
So what the fuck do you know? What do you know then? Wait, you don't know who was talking? You're making all these claims about what was in the decision room, and like, I actually don't know jack shit. I'm just so. It sounds like you were at a distance, at an arm's distance away from the room where it happened.
In the White
7
House.
times.
Quite a bit, yeah, quite a bit. And then his other officials as well, Dermer, et cetera, those guys were in, they were making phone calls, just a lot of engagement.
God, this guy's a snake.
From them. And again, when we would hear, or you'd hear what they were saying, it didn't reflect in intelligence channels, even intelligence that we shared with the Israelis, that the Israelis were giving us in many cases. So there was a clear, gap between, the intelligence and then the information that the president was given and the decisions that the president was making.
I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. Obviously, you're not going to divulge anything that's classified. I don't think you would. You definitely shouldn't, because there are people who hurt you for that, and you shouldn't. So without encouraging you to do that, I think it's a commonplace. It's understood in Washington. I've heard from many people who work in your business that a substantial portion of our information touches Israel at some point. Either it's collected by them, it is shaped by them. It's not purely American. Do you think it's fair?
especially in the Middle East, I would say. I mean, look, the Israelis are tactically very proficient.
Yes.
They have a very competent intelligence service, and there's a lot that we can learn from them in the craft of intelligence.
Yes.
So they're very proficient. They're very good. However, whenever we get information from a liaison service, I think it's incredibly important to
A liaison service? I don't know what he means by
realize that it could be given to us to influence us as well as to inform us.
This is really important to not be used by your sources.
And the way that I would see Israeli information, in particular coming from senior officials directly to our senior officials, that caveat just wasn't given frequently enough. And there's a lot of times, some of this is just because of bureaucratic practice, but a lot of it I think is just we feel very comfortable with the Israelis. A lot of them are dual citizens. They sound like us. They don't feel foreign. We kind of go into a more complacent mode where we trust a lot of what they have to say, not keeping in the back of our mind.
So general, so non-specific. Oh, some of them have dual loyalties. So anything to avoid dealing with the fact that you Americans, the Americans, got us into this fucking mess. Your boy got us into this mess.
And that they have their own agenda and we have our own agenda at the end of the day. Now, I'd say a lot of times we have the same agenda. It's very, very, I think, tactically the same when it comes to fighting Hezbollah, when it comes to fighting terrorism, sure. But when it comes to what's our strategic goal in a war that's going to have ramifications for our nation, for the region, for global energy supplies, I think most folks right now at the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies, they would say us and the Israelis actually have a different objective here. I don't believe that.
No shit. Of course we do. Of course we do.
Our objective is.
And this is, I mean, just the most obvious thing in the world, which is extra, extra, extra bad for your boy that you're defending right now, that you're not attacking for obvious reasons.
And clearly defined because we're shying away from regime change. The Israelis are not shying away from regime change. They want to knock out lock, stock, and barrel the current government. They don't seem to have a plan for what comes next.
Well, that was my next question. And I think you would have heard tell of such a plan. So if you're going to take out government, I think it's fair to ask what replaces it. And I've asked a bunch of people, many people, this question, never gotten any answer whatsoever other than there's no plan. The Israelis don't have a plan because they don't care. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's completely fair. I think as Americans, rightfully, we want a clear stated objective and end state for war. I think that's something that was born out of the GWAT, was born out of the Vietnam era.
We want a plan. It's like everything is totally ad hoc. The decisions are ad hoc. The strategy is ad hoc. The personnel, they're following along just to preserve their own careers. And instead of a concerted and strident belief in doing what's best for the American people, everyone's in it for themselves. Gabbard's in it for herself. That's why she released that cagey statement, that totally cowardly statement. You're in it for yourself. JD Vance, because he's walking around in eggshells. Did you hear him, by the way, talking about gas prices, finally admitting that gas prices are up and still trying to blame Joe Biden somehow. And so that's their first concern, is not holding the bag when this all blows up in their faces. It's starting to. That's it. And the only thing potentially maybe that'll save us is these people's self-interest will become so apparent to them that they'll take some corrective action. And maybe that's what Trump is trying to do, but it doesn't look like he has a way to do that while, quote unquote, saving face.
Americans want to know why we're going to war, what the end state is, and they can get on board in general if that's clearly articulated. That's not the case with Iran. The Israelis are different. I think a lot of times, again, because a lot of them speak English, they culturally feel the same, but the Israelis have a much different tolerance for how and why they're going to war and for their endurance for war. The Israelis are completely fine with Iran slipping into chaos. That means that the Ayatollah and the IRGC can't really threaten them anymore. Hezbollah's money might be cut off in their head. And so complete chaos in Iran, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the Israelis. For us, for global energy, Straits of Hormuz, our partners in the GCC, mass migration problems in Europe, this is a major problem.
It's a catastrophe for the world.
For the world, yeah.
Hate to brag, but we're pretty confident this show is the most vehemently pro. But so for that growing pet you need, offering and or have to leave no wasted money shipping on actually for 50 and your wallet.
Lectures for
well, thank you.
Right. And it's a little galling that I was treated to lectures for a couple of weeks about, the valiant people of Iran and how we needed to save them. And then a lot of the exile.
This is totally true. I mean, the false statements of sympathy from people who don't give a single shit. I mean, just take this one instance, right? So Trump is asked, hey, what about these 100+ young girls who were massacred? Almost certainly unintentional. I don't really believe that we were targeting them. I don't think it's in America's interest to intentionally target children. Though I think that there should be a full investigation to find out what the hell happened there. What intelligence were we relying on? What's going on there? What's going on? But put that aside, like in the immediate aftermath of that tragedy, Trump says it was Iran. He's asked about it. He said, it was Iran. It was Iran's Tomahawk missile. They bombed their own school with Tomahawks. So where's the actual accountability for that? Where's the accountability? Where's the desire to help the Iranian people? Where's the sympathy? Where's the understanding? This guy's like prefrontal lobe is shrinking. He doesn't have the capacity to care about someone other than himself.
Communities here in the United States of Iranians, a lot of them really nice people. Sure. They jumped on board. We got to save our people. But by your telling and by the facts, by the way, this is not really an opinion. There's no plan for what happens after regime change. Like the people pushing that line would be happy to see a permanent civil war there.
Which is insanity. So if we do want a real regime change and we want the people to rise up, we want it to happen fairly organically, going aggressively after the Ayatollah was the last thing that we ever should have done. Again, like I'm no fan of the former supreme leader, like Khamenei. However, he was moderating their nuclear program. He was preventing them from getting a nuclear weapon. If you take him out, if you kill him aggressively, people are going to rally around that regime. And the next Ayatollah that you get, and I think this is the case by all data that we have with his son, the next Ayatollah that you get is going to be more radical because he has to show the people that he's going to push back. And there's always a tension inside of Iran between the IRGC, the Iranian
YouGov, who deserves the most blame for rising gas prices? Trump, Iran, oil companies, or Biden? And then people who say prices will go down or say the same. Okay? So people who say prices will go down or say the same, delusion. 33% of the people. So 33% of the American people are insanely delusional. Insanely delusional. Like that is delusional. Delusional. Maybe if we stop the war, but prices will go down? Holy delusion, Batman. Here's who they blame. From the bottom up. Biden, 2%. 2%. 2%. The Biden deflection is not working. No one buys it. I don't know what they think they're doing. 2% believe it's Biden's fault for rising gas prices. This is from YouGov. Oil companies, 8%. Not even double digits. People fucking hate oil companies. Iran, not even double digits, 9%. Among people who think that the price of gas is going to rise, i.e. the people who live in reality, 40%. Sorry, no, not the total pie, right? Is 40% believe it's Trump. And if you just take a percentage of the people who believe it's going to go up, it's the overwhelming majority believe it's Trump's fault. Trump's going to get the blame. And pretending about it, trying to deflect to Biden ain't going to work. And the people who are delusional think the prices will stay the same, they're in for a rude awakening because those prices are going to go up and they're going to be a bit stickier than you think, even after we're done with the conflict, assuming that we're done in any reasonable amount of time. Assuming that we're done, they're going to linger. There's a price stickiness about a lot of this stuff. And that's not just on fuel prices, but also on all the other things that rely on the cost of fuel and energy.
Revolutionary Guard Corps and the clerics who run the country. They have a healthy, I think, tension between the two, a rivalry. IRGC's leadership, these are Qasem Soleimani's troops. These are the guys that Soleimani trained. These guys, most of them cut their teeth in the Iraq-Iran war. A lot of them cut their teeth fighting us in Iraq. They cut their teeth fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. They created Hezbollah. They trained and armed Hezbollah. So these guys are actually pretty serious and pretty hardline, and they're willing to fight and they want to fight. And so by killing the Ayatollah, we've given them more power because now internally they can go and they can say, hey, all you guys who thought that we could negotiate with the Americans, you're chumps. We have to fight them. So I think the longer this goes on, the more negotiators, the more moderates.
What is the basis of the negotiation with the current administration? There's nothing. Trump lies and tries to kill you while you're negotiating. So negotiation is totally over in the short term. And I just don't know what the deal would look like other than something that's incredibly not face saving. That might involve like reparations for the Iranian regime, which I can't imagine Trump. This is why I think that invasion with troops on the ground is the most likely outcome. I don't think that there's any deal that the Iranians would agree to that they could believe would actually be accomplished that doesn't involve Trump not saving face or whatever.
That are killed off, like we just killed, Ali Laranjani, who was a negotiator, who was eager to.
Yeah, I mean they are killing negotiators. He was an important part. This guy was an important part of the internal Iranian state.
Get us a deal. Again, look, I've got no love for the IRGC. I've got no love for the Iranians. But you've got to realize,
just to be clear,
if you want to
in case you're tuning in right now, you fought their proxies.
I fought their proxies. I mean, I put countless of them in flex cuffs or much worse. I've gone after the Iranians. I was in specialized outfits that went after the Iranians and their proxies. These are very serious people. They're not supermen by any means. They're humans, but they're serious. And if you give the IRGC a reason to take more control and they get support from the people, because again, you kill off the Ayatollah, they can say, hey, the last guy was too moderate. Look at what it got us. Like, give us more control.
I get it.
And the Iranian people are going to be like, well, actually, yeah, I don't like getting bombed by the Americans and the Israelis. Maybe we do need to listen to the IRGC.
So a lot of these, the points that you're making, I think are insightful, but they're also pretty obvious if you kind of game it out for 10 seconds. Yeah. So it seems like you've got two different goals. You've described Israel's goal as just regime change, permanent chaos, take Iran off the map as a coherent nation state, just tie them up with internal chaos, whatever the effects of that are on the rest of the world, all of them disastrous. Then on the American side, you have the president's stated goal, which is we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon, which they didn't have and weren't trying to build in any imminent way.
Right.
Okay. So if you join those two together in a common mission in a war, like that's our partner in this war, then you create all kinds of very bad incentives. Mm-hmm. And now Laranjani, I think, was killed by the Israelis. You saw the Israelis blow up Qatari natural gas facilities today.
I mean, that just happened, and we just saw the Trump response, which I read before, which is showing that he's totally out of control.
Qatari natural gas field, which feeds the rest of the world, LNG. Those seem like very obvious steps, not to minimize the threat from Iran, but to lock down the United States in perma-war. We can't get out after we do that. You kill the negotiator. You attack our closest ally in the region, is probably Qatar. You attack Qatar, apparently? Like, no one thought this might happen?
And there's no reins on the Israelis, unfortunately. I mean, we continue to refer to them like as our partners, are equal to the best partners we've ever had. But at the end of the day, the Israelis couldn't do any of this without us. And so we
they're
have to be
acting against our interests in a very obvious and very serious way.
And again, it's obvious if we've stated that our goal is just to take away their ability to ever even enrich and to take away their ballistics and to take away their Navy, all these kind of tactical objectives. If we say that that's our objective, and that's when we can come to a place where we can just exit, it's in the Israelis' interest to get us more and more entrenched in this.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what they're doing right now. When the Israelis killed Laranjani, I think I may have misspoke and said we didn't kill him. The Israelis,
yes.
The Israelis struck him. But I do believe in Iran at this point in the war.
So wait, Israel bombed Qatar? Yeah. So, and this is, do you want to know Trump's reasoning for why Israel did it? This is Trump's reasoning. We read it before. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is a quote directly from Trump about why Israel bombed Qatar. Okay. I'm sorry. Did I say Israel bombed Qatar? Why Israel bombed the Iranian oil field, which led to Iran bombing Qatar. I don't know who. Wait a second. I don't know what I said. I'm confusing myself. Sorry. Iran bombed Qatar. Okay. But Israel bombed the oil infrastructure of Iran. And this is why they did it. Israel, quote, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. A relatively small section of the whole has been hit. If I said that Israel attacked Qatar, I'm wrong about that. So, sorry. But afterwards, Trump says, Iran did not know this. Unfortunately, Iran did not know this or any of the pertinent facts. And that's why they attacked Qatar. So that's a direct line of causality to Israel. And at the end of the day, Trump is saying it's because of violent lash outs out of anger, quote, out of anger. And Israel did, in fact, bomb Qatar last year to try to get to, I think, some Hamas leadership or something, or Hezbollah leadership.
Or they view it as, whether we like it or not, I think they view it as...
My bad. If I said Israel bombed Qatar, I'm wrong about that. Iran bombed Qatar. My bad.
Us and the Israelis kind of as the same thing.
Well, we've described it that way.
Because the Israelis couldn't do any of this without us. And then that's where the relationship is just way off kilter. If they have different objectives than us, then what are we doing letting them drive the war?
In spirit.
So you just said something that's been disputed many times by the well, I'm not going to name anybody, but by advocates for Israel. It's a PR department here in the United States, which is huge. And you said they couldn't do any of this without us. You often hear its promoters, its lobbyists say, Israel just wants to fight its own wars. Back off and let us do it. Is that not?
I'd love us to run the experiment. We try that.
What would happen?
You'd love that, huh? You would love for Israel to fight their own wars. You know what? I actually think that it would be cool for us not to need to go to war with everyone that Israel's going to war with. I think that would actually be pretty based, actually.
You know, the Israelis, again, they have they have the ability to go out and collect great intelligence. They have a very capable military, but they're a very small country. I think Israel would be able to defend itself. I think it could conduct, limited strikes on its borders. I think it could continue carrying out pretty impressive targeted assassinations against its adversaries. And so I think you would see it relatively contained. What it couldn't do is go topple entire governments. It couldn't do something like the Iran war, the Iraq war. It couldn't aggressively, destabilize Syria. These big.
That's what Trump is claiming. Now, there's reporting that suggests that America okayed it. So, again, Trump could just be lying. I spoke about this with Connor, too, that the decision to support this war, you can view the justification in legal terms, where I think it's an illegal war under U.S. law, certainly illegal under international law, but we don't even no one even wants to talk about that, right? No one even wants to talk about that. So we just kind of focus it on U.S. law, certainly legal. In the kind of strategic sense, you can criticize it for not accomplishing, or maybe our aims aren't good, or the strategy that's being employed won't achieve the aims that we seek, right? There's that aspect to it. And then there's a kind of personnel way to critique the war or to see the war, that dimension of well, who do you trust? Even assuming that in general, this is a wise action, even assuming it's legal, or that you don't care if it's illegal, even assuming that it's the right goal and this will accomplish that, do you want these people running that assumedly good goal with the assumedly good strategy, irrespective of whether it's legal? And the answer is no, because they're liars, right? So Trump could just be lying about whether or not he knew in advance that Israel was going to do this. It could be the case that America literally okayed it and he's throwing Netanyahu under the bus. And that's actually not a good thing. Now, okay, is being resistant to Israel's further attempts to entrench us in this conflict, is that good? Yes, generally. But the lying about shit makes it so that the American people don't have a basis under which to assess how the war is going, to have an internal check mechanism. It makes all of us have to, if you support the war, which I think is crazy, you have to give deference to Trump in many respects in his assessment of what's going on. Put your faith in the dear leader, because you have no basis on which to judge the information coming out, whether it's true or false.
Heavy lifts of regime change that America has been engaged in, Israel could not do on their own, which is why you get back to the Israeli lobby being just so potent and so powerful and so aggressive.
So that, and I want to ask you about that because that's the line that you're being attacked for. And so I want to go through and have you explain more.
I mean, I have a problem with funding of Israel in general, until we resolve we have final status issues resolved, and that we stop settlements on the West Bank. I mean, we need to just address further, tranquility issues in the Middle East vis-a-vis the Palestinian question, right? So I have a problem with America not more forcefully getting, or to the extent that they can, a negotiation and agreement there. Now, maybe it's impossible because of the principles in the various different areas, Hamas included. So, but yeah, America has some culpability here for a lot of the Israeli policies.
Fully, if you would, why you said what you did.
Yeah, Lebanon is another example. But I don't know that America right now is engaged in strikes on Lebanon. But, yeah.
And read it. But before I do that, one last question. Was any of this debated that you know of before this?
Yes, I've said so. You guys are so fucking annoying. It's this is always just a attempt to funnel the conversation into the genocide question, funnel this conversation into, but so there's a way you can ask that question, legitimately, what is your position? Right? But just how it's asked is always in the most obnoxious way.
War commenced 3 weeks ago. Did anyone say, well, wait a second, if we do this and kill the Ayatollah, because that was the first order, I think.
I was just curious, lol. I mean, no, okay. it acts as like you're acting as though you're like coaxing it out of me or something, or you're like coaching me. Like, see,
What are the effects after, and like what's the goal? Did these debates ever?
I know they happened
emerged?
heavily before the 12-day war. I think that when the Israelis came back around and said they wanted to do this, I just don't think there was any debate. I think just based on the ecosystem and the amount of influence that was exerted.
Because in some ways this is a little humiliating.
hear that again.
For the 12-day war, I think that when the Israelis came back around and said they wanted to do this, I just don't think there was any debate. I think just based on the ecosystem and the amount of influence that was exerted.
The amount of influence that was exerted and principles were receptive to, including, by the way, the Secretary of State. Are we really meant to believe that Marco Rubio in principle doesn't want this war? That Hegseth in principle doesn't want this war?
Because in some ways this is a little humiliating, since we were told, I was told, the whole country was told, that after the 12-day war there was no Iranian nuclear threat. We got rid of it. I'm not imagining that. It just happened last summer.
Yeah.
Do you recall those statements?
Yeah, I mean, Operation Midnight Hammer
Yes.
destroyed their nuclear capability. So
how?
Why does he look like a kid who's like caught in a lie?
Hammer
Yes.
destroyed their nuclear capability. So
Do you see how like tentative he is on that?
So how was it that we wound up 6 months later getting another lecture about their nuclear capability and its imminent threat to the United States and nuclear tip ballistic missiles aimed at Miami and the whole thing? And nobody, first of all, there was no organized protest against this. Like in a normal country, you'd think people would rise up and be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Mm-hmm.
You just told us 6 months ago the exact opposite. What did internally in the intel world people say, what the hell is going on?
I just think that the planning for this was so compartmentalized.
I don't think it's okay to ally with Israel to attack Iran. Did you just get here? I'm against the war. Are you stupid? Also, by the way, there's nothing inconsistent with you doing that if you think there's a greater threat. Like, we allied with Stalin. So you're wrong on just the principle ground. You're wrong on that ground. That there's nothing inconsistent if there's a greater threat, even as unsavory as it is. I mean, we allied with Stalin. We allied with bad people all the time. We ally with like brutal regimes. So there's nothing inconsistent from if there's some sort of greater evil or some greater purpose that you're accomplishing, like the defeat of some, give it like a Nazi regime. But you're also, I guess your implication here is that I'm not in favor, or that I am in favor of attacking Iran, which obviously I'm not.
That there was no debate, as in it was a foregone conclusion. Maybe the exact timing they weren't exactly aware of, or that had to be debated. When do we do it? But it seemed to be a foregone conclusion. And I'm sure others will say, no, that's not the case at all. But there was no robust debate like there was going into the 12-day war. Because the big question that a lot of us had that were skeptical of Operation Midnight Hammer was, okay, so we do this. We know the Israelis' whole goal is regime change. What makes us think they'll stop? And if they do stop for a period of time, why won't we just be back in the same place in 6 months where they're saying that we have to go back in? And that's essentially exactly what happened.
So this was raised.
No, that doesn't follow either, you fucking idiot. Just because I think that Israel's doing bad things, or that Israel is coaxing us into this war or pressuring us, doesn't mean that, like, you guys are so stupid. And this is why, I'm not all leftists again, this is why people don't like you. Because you say things that don't even make sense, that don't follow. Well, if that's the case, it doesn't follow that the best way to prevent the thing that you don't like is a given course of action. You actually have to justify that. So this preachy bullshit is winning you no favors, and it's not even necessarily true.
This was raised to my knowledge in June. This was like, hey, what happens next? So you take out the nuclear, the ability for them to enrich and to potentially develop a nuclear weapon. That's done. We know the Israelis have a completely different goal. Part of that strike Midnight Hammer was also to get the Israelis to wrap up the 12-day war. But we knew, because of what the Israelis told us, that they wanted, this is the time to take down the regime. And they don't want the Ayatollah to be in power. They want a regime change. They want a new government there. So we said, okay, knowing that, we know that this strike, this limited strike we're going to do, isn't going to
Look
get
at this shit. Look at how simplistic genocide. Yeah, bad. But don't you want to prevent the genocide? It's a nuclear power. The question you have to ask yourself is, what is likely to achieve the aims that you want? What do you think is likely to achieve the aims that you want? And you have to make a case actually for it. You just want to think with your dick, think with your heart, without putting some thought into it. I'm not in favor of sending aid to Israel. I'm in favor of stopping that completely. I think that we should exert more influence there, but I'm not convinced that ending diplomatic relationships with Israel is the best way to coerce them. Make the case for it, dipshit. Make the case for it, dipshit. Hey, dipshit, make the case for it. So make the case, right? ending and the diplomatic relationships with Israel is good because it will achieve the following. What will it achieve? Dipshit. You already made the case. What's the case? That you will actually have accomplished the aim. See, this is what these people want to do. They're dead enders that only believe in one strategy. They'll next I'll ask you, shouldn't we invade Israel? Right? What, you don't support invading Israel? Would you invade Israel? Slides. Should we invade Israel? Obviously, that's what we do when there's a genocidal regime, right? We invade. We have an obligation to stop it. You wouldn't invade Israel. Why wouldn't you invade Israel, actually? Don't you believe it's a genocide? Don't you think genocide is bad? I agree that I don't want to fund Israel. So we agree on that, right? But you wouldn't invade Israel, but Israel bad, right? Maybe it's a little bit more complicated, right? Maybe all these questions isn't just, well, bad guys, therefore maximal strategy. If you don't have actually a good reason to think it will accomplish the aim, or maybe it'll make things worse. Maybe it'll make things worse. And this is why you can't stand it, because they won't compromise. They won't do the thing that it takes to get the result that they want. And you can see that in their dead-end strategy, that they're still defending like voting Green Party or not voting for the Democrats. They're dead-enders on that because they don't give a shit about Palestinian lives or any of this. You know, I talked to Prime Kai, all love to him, but he said, even if it were the case that I knew that my vote would save 20,000 Palestinian lives for a Democrat, I wouldn't do it. But it obviously makes no sense, right? Because if you take that view, then why wouldn't you invade Israel? We'll obviously have to consider the cost of making things worse, right? The cost of making things worse. And if you don't consider, well, maybe cutting off diplomatic relationships will make things worse. Maybe it's not a failing of moral character for someone to be hesitant to commit themselves to that policy, notwithstanding their agreement that we should stop funding Israel. Low IQ lefty, identified. Low IQ, identified, low IQ.
At some point, the Israelis are going to come back to us and say, hey, we have to go again. And with that knowledge, and I think because so many of us had pointed that out, and because the Israelis had said it, there wasn't a big debate this last time. I think they had that discussion, behind closed doors, and there wasn't a chance for any dissenting voices to come in.
But you would think, well, I've seen it before. When a question like this arises, the people making the decision go immediately to their own intel agencies, and in your case, the agency that has jurisdiction over those agencies, and say, all available intel on the question of the Iranian nuclear program, all available intel on the question of ICBMs or its ballistic missile program, all available intel on what might happen if we topple the regime in place. Like, this has all been gamed out for a long time. There's a constant process of gathering intel on it, correct?
Yeah. And that's what we did in the lead up to the 12-day war.
But this time, no.
Not to my knowledge. And I'm sure the administration will come out and say, no, you just weren't invited. But I've got a pretty good idea of how those meetings look. And if I wasn't invited, I at least would have known that they took place. Again, it just...
So what do you know? What do you fucking know, Mr. Kent? You're relying on information that was not available to you, at least in some respect. And I do think that there's like a desire to overread the importance of Joe Kent in this context. And we should not do that. But either way, right? Like, whether he's involved in these conversations or not, at least there was no effort even. So imagine how bad it is, right? So the Bush administration, to its credit, again, not in a way that satisfied or should satisfy anybody, tried to make their case to the American people to intervention. The Trump administration didn't do that, obviously. Enough said. They didn't do that. But what else they didn't do is convince their own executive branch. There wasn't an effort within the government to apprise everybody and convince them of the need to do this. So not only is the administration not making its case to the American people, making its case to Congress, making its case to the international partners, it's not making its case known and convincing to itself. So disorganized and incompetent that Trump is.
It seemed to be a foregone conclusion that this was happening.
So most people don't wake up in the morning and decide to feel horrible. That's why we're happy, ready to therapy tuck supplements. That's 20.
I almost
off supplements. Join Blokes. Get your edge back.
So I almost don't want to bring this up because it's so distressing, but I have to ask a question about blowback, the effects, the downstream effects of military action, terrorism in the United States. And I have the feeling we're going to see some of it, but I want to ask you. But since you are an acknowledged expert on that question, and since you spent your adult life fighting Iranian
Not according to Trump. He said he's bad on security.
proxies, and because we're always hearing some of them are in the United States, did anyone go to you and say, if we do this, what are the odds that we will have terror attacks in the homeland here in the U.S.?
That was a piece or an intelligence product that we worked up on our own.
I bet.
And coordinated throughout the intelligence community. Basically, we talked about the Iranians' ability to conduct sleeper cell like attacks, which is actually pretty limited. The whole idea of sleeper cell.
This is from Yashar Ali. I don't know if it's true. Oh no, it's Washington Post. According to the Washington Post, apparently, U.S. officials detected unidentified drones above the Washington Army base, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth live. Officials have not determined where they came from. Can you imagine? I really hope, because that will do nothing good. If there is some sort of enemy that's doing those drones things. Hopefully it's just like, I don't know, some stupid mix-up or something. I don't know.
Or a cell operating is challenging in today's environment because cells have to communicate with each other, and we're pretty good at picking up on that. The real threat, and most major terrorist organizations have kind of moved to this model, is the lone actors. Yes. It's inspiring people that are already in place by using the media. There was already a ton of blowback, because the Gaza war. Hamas used propaganda very, very effectively to, I think, curry a lot of favor with younger people here in the United States and abroad. And there was multiple terrorist attacks in America in the last year where Gaza was cited because they consumed some of the propaganda coming out of Gaza. And these people weren't, infiltrated Iranian agents. They were here, folks that were homegrown. And so we said, hey, the biggest threat right now isn't that the Iranians are going to sneak some guys over and they've been waiting here for years and they're Quds Force operatives. That's always possible. Again, the Iranians are very competent as well. And they have tried something like that before in the past, back under the Obama administration when they tried to kill the Saudi ambassador in Georgetown. So we were worried about that. But what we were more worried about was the fact that Biden had the border open for 4+ years. And
oh my God.
Testified publicly in Congress.
They're shitting more on Biden for the border than they are about Trump starting this illegal war, which is essentially what they're here about. And again, if there is a domestic terrorist attack that is directly linked to the conduct in or the illegal war in Iran, they're going to try to blame Biden. They'll be like, oh, the border. And it doesn't matter if the facts later show that he came in when Trump was in office or he's a sleeper cell that's been around for whatever. They're just going to say it was Biden's fault. I mean, that's their playbook. Their playbook is immigrants bad, denaturalize and deport Muslims, and it's Biden's fault. That's all they got. And it's not going to work.
Laying out the all 18,000 known suspected terrorists that potentially could be in the country. Since then, we've discovered potentially more. The problem is the bookkeeping under the Biden administration was kind of like the border. It was wide open. And so we don't know how many folks are actually in the country that should.
The bookkeeping was wide open, like the border was, right? So just like the border was wide open, the bookkeeping was wide open. I don't know what that means, dude.
Be here. It's millions. How many of them have ties to countries that are adjacent to Iran or that are Iranian? As I left, we were still working on some of those numbers, but we've seen several terrorist attacks since these operations began in America, and they all fit that lone actor inspired model. So the blowback is, as longer this goes on and the more the propaganda inevitably gets weaponized, we are going to see more than likely more people here that are radicalized. Now, frankly, I think that and this is another great thing about President Trump, none of these people should be in the country. We should have tighter immigration policies. We should be focused right now. Our focus should be on finding everyone who shouldn't be in our country right now and getting them out as soon as possible, not in another foreign adventure.
I wonder, so you've already seen in the wake of a recent terror attack, neocons use that attack as a way to try and censor, shut down, maybe even imprison critics of the decision to go to war in Iran. So it's almost like you control both sides. Mm-hmm. Like you advocate for a war, which inevitably stokes religious hatred because you advocate for the killing of a religious leader. Okay, so you're helping to create religious war, permanent generational religious war. And then when your country, or the country you happen to be living in that you don't really care about, feels the effects, when Americans are killed as a result of that, you use their deaths to justify the silencing of people who criticized you. Does that make sense?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's it's a point that people and liberals and Democrats should take to heart as well. And this is where I actually will side with lefties 100%. The Democrats who are choosing, or at least seem to be flirting with the idea of funding this war, you are giving your tacit approval to an administration to invoke emergency authorities to curtail civil liberties at home. There's an old adage from Rome. I think it goes, in times of war, the law goes silent. Let me just make sure that is accurate, what I'm telling you. In times of war, the law falls silent. Inter arma enim silent legis. In times of war, the law falls silent. It's a Latin maxim attributed to Cicero, meaning that legal protections often give way to security needs during conflict. This is classic. Everyone knows it. And so, obviously, the administration is going to use this war as an excuse to go after people. They're already doing it. They were already doing it before there was a war, vis-a-vis Palestinian protesters, Mahmoud Khalil, Ramez Ozturk, all of the campuses, all the people who, lawyers who represent individuals that the administration considers to be enemies. They're all already doing it, and they did it before the war. They're just going to double down on it. So why would we? It's similar to the kind of ICE thing, where we had Democrats, I think 4 of them, maybe more than 4. But certainly people like Swazi, people like Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, speak of the devil, who signed on to funding ICE in the context in which they're doing racialized stops, they're denying due process, they're depriving citizens of their rights. We have rulings from courts that show that they're doing protectual stops without any probable cause or reasonable suspicion that are retaliatory in nature, that is, they go against the First Amendment. So why ever would you? This is just so natural. It's obvious that they are going to start doing that. Tucker's absolutely correct about it. That's putting aside the specific issue of Tucker's criminality or potentially Joe Kent's criminality. This has to do about broader just opposition. You know, the FCC chairman comes out and says, if you essentially, right, if you don't go by our standard when it comes to coverage of the Iran war, we'll pull your broadcast license. So Democrats need to keep that in mind. It's insanity to fund this war. It's insanity.
So how much are you concerned we're going to see more of that?
I'm very concerned. I think I pray we won't, but the odds are not in our favor, just considering how open our borders have been. Obviously, this type of propaganda radicalizes people. Again, we've already seen attacks.
The 4, for example, who refused to sign on to the War Powers Resolution, and there have been inside reports by journalists that say that people are saying that there's Democrats who are willing to fund. Even Ruben Gallego, when pressed, said he would be willing to fund just 50-50. It has to be like 50-50 with a funding source from some other, maybe international actors or something. So there are Democrats, I think, who've been on the record saying they might be willing to fund the war, and then there's inside reporting about it too. So, yeah.
We saw attacks inspired by the conflict in Gaza. So I think we're going to see more of this, and then just, made the mistake of opening up Twitter a couple times today. There's people calling for, dissenting voices to be charged, to be locked up,
of course,
et cetera. And so,
they may be.
The erosion of civil rights, I think, during a time of conflict is nothing new. Unfortunately, we've seen it before.
It's the rule. But I wonder, though, is like people talk through, or maybe they didn't talk it through, but did anybody in the lead up to this, I just want to ask it again to make sure I understand the answer, in the lead up to this war, which is now a regional war, potentially a global war, big war, biggest war of our lives, did anyone come...
Biggest war of our lives? Biggest war of our lives. Swazi's district voted Trump. I know that. I absolutely know that. There are some issues where I'm going to be way less lenient when it comes to these sort of in danger Democrats who live in Trump-like districts. I will give them a great deal of space on a number of issues. But when it comes to things that affect rights, the Constitution, hell no. I don't ever compromise on that with Democrats. So Tom Swazi voting and people like, for example, voting for the Lake and Riley Act, voting to fund DHS, that needs to be called out, and I don't give a shit. That goes for Jared Golden. That goes for all these guys. If you're talking about our system, our Constitution, our rights, man, I mean, you cannot just compromise on that. That's crazy. That's insane.
I just want to ask it again to make sure I understand the answer. In the lead up to this war, which is now a regional war, potentially a global war, big war, biggest war of our lives, did anyone come to you and say, what's your projection?
It kind of warms my soul that they'll never admit the left was right before them, just improving our chances of being right before the right again. Don't know what you're referencing, but I think that you're talking about these people admitting the left was right on like Trump and stuff, I think, right?
And for like what the effects on the United States will be. Like how many Americans could die at the shopping mall because of this, or at school?
We proactively wrote an assessment,
Yeah,
which is what we tend to do anyways. But again, there just wasn't a huge process and a debate about this last iteration.
But you're worried about it.
I'm very concerned.
See, that is insanely concerning. Insanely concerning. Just absolutely, right? That it's not even just an issue of they didn't consult Congress. They didn't consult the American people like Bush did. They didn't consult themselves, man. Assuming this guy knows it.
I am too.
Which, again, big assumption.
I am too. Yeah, I'm too. Okay, so let me read you the most controversial, and you've addressed this to some extent, but I'd like you to flesh it out a little more, if you don't mind. You say to support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on during 3 campaigns and that you enacted. You understood up until June of 2025 that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. Early in this administration, this is the change, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran.
Remember, this is just like rewriting history. Totally rewriting history.
This echo chamber was
like he was always hawkish. Trump was always a warmonger, and he always said that he would be willing to strike Iran like this.
used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war.
A lie that Trump is a party to.
That cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. So I think you've explained how the echo chamber and the lobbying campaign worked. It wasn't just on Fox and the Wall Street Journal.
Are you going to get to it, Tucker?
It was by telephone and text
Elephant in
messaging
the room. Let's get to it.
And it was relentless. And there was no countervailing campaign. There was almost nobody who went to the president and said, well, actually, here's the American view.
If that's true, that's so, like, imagine being Tulsi and not even being like marginalized and sidelined and being totally unimportant, which I believe that she is incredibly unimportant. She's just there as a, did you guys ever play Hades? How many of you have played Hades, the game? It's like a roguelite. She's there as the Skelly guy. Hey, boyo. That guy. That's what Tulsi Gabbard's job is. But imagine being so pathetic that not only are you Skelly, you're just a punching bag for Democrats, but you won't even go to Trump to advise him against it. You didn't even raise the concern. That's how useless you are. Not only are you eating the whole bag, but you didn't even raise the concern internally if what they're saying is true. And I believe it. That's how pathetic you are.
Which is frustrating. But
it's frustrating. It's frustrating. Like, just so frustrating. Who could have thought this could happen?
View. Which is frustrating.
It's like that big, It's like that's the kind of energy I'm getting from these cucks.
But then you allude at the end of that to the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. And I think you told me at dinner last night, I think you spent 5 years total. You 11 combat deployments. You spent about, you think, 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, 9 of those deployments were to Iraq for 6 to 8 months. So, yeah.
Okay, so you've had some time to think about the Iraq War.
yeah. More time than is healthy, yeah.
Can I just say, because it makes me... So here you go, you join the Army at 18. 18, yeah.
You
spend your whole young life there. Go to all these wars, 11 deployments. You spend 5 years in Iraq, over 7 deployments, and you reach a series of conclusions, fighting and being shot at by Iranian proxies, and now you say, I don't think this war is good for America, and you're being slandered
go to war with Iran, Morty.
As a bad, unpatriotic quitter
we got a bomb
who secretly
Soleimani.
Sympathizes with the Ayatollah. I just have to ask you how that feels.
I mean, they love you when you're just saluting and moving out, but then the second you say, I don't think we should be doing this, and I have an opinion now, then all the attacks come at you. But I truly believe that that God put me where I am right now, really putting me through everything I've been through in my life to bring me to this point. I don't believe that God said, hey, you're here now in this moment to just sit back and be a good soldier for this iteration. I've had lots of friends who have said, hey, I think you would have been more value staying in the administration with your experiences.
Doing what? Just fetching water?
And I understand that.
Oh, thank you for the APAC money, Talibots. Yo, Talibots, we should catch up on your take on the administration. At some point, we should touch base. You gotta smuggle these bombs, Morty. Put them away. We gotta kill Ayatollah.
and I'm flattered by it. But considering all that I've seen, the conclusions that I've reached, I feel like I'm here for a reason.
Years you're in war.
Something I think probably on my third or fourth deployment, as I was realizing that we were lied to get us into Iraq, and that we had a whole mess that we now had to clean up, and how much it mirrored and echoed Vietnam. I remember, as being in my mid to late 20s, being very frustrated with a lot of the Vietnam veterans who did not speak up against. I know some did, but especially Vietnam veterans who stayed in service, as I had intended to do, who stayed in service and who advocated for the Iraq War. Colin Powell is someone who I have a lot of respect for the way he fought in Vietnam, his leadership in Desert Storm, but then the way that he was part of lying to get us into the Iraq.
So Colin, so this is what this is where we're at, right? They're going after Colin Powell for being a party to a lie. But that's old news. Guys, you want to feel old? The Iraq War started 23 years ago. About. Colin Powell's party to a lie, he says. What about Donald Trump? We're an hour and 11 minutes into this. There's not a single directed critique so far as to Trump. It's all like and this is why you get this, why I say that they're Jew baiting, right? Why do I say that? Why do I say that this is a cover up? What they're doing is because it's a lie. It's a lie. And they're just saying, they have all this influence, these elite groups, 100%. Everyone can see what they're doing. Everyone can see what they're doing.
War, and then staying on and continuing those lies, knowing full well, having all the experiences of being a guy on the ground in a feudal war that was, basically we were deployed to under false pretenses. He had all that knowledge, and because he wanted to be loyal to, I think, the president, and I think he wanted to be loyal to what he felt was the government that would eventually get it right.
Yeah, because I just got my check from AIPAC. That's why I say that.
He didn't step out and say, we shouldn't be doing this. And I just remember reflecting on that. And, I said to myself at the time, and this might seem, silly and idealistic, but said to myself at the time, if it's ever my turn, if it's ever my generation's turn, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure this doesn't happen to the next generation. So a real breaking point for me.
And how did that work out?
I did the best I could for a couple of weeks as this war started from the inside to try and find, off ramps to try and provide information to see what.
Dude, you're a water boy. You're a water boy. Let's
from
be
the
real.
inside.
You're in a senior position, but it just sounds like you were shut out of the conversation, that you had no influence. You had no power. If Tulsi has no power, how do you have any power? What were you going to do?
But watching the casualties roll in, and I don't want to use anyone's, loss as a political talking point, but for me.
The fuck you don't. I don't want to use loss as a political talking point. By the way, this is the guy that, he ran as a pro-Israel Trump supporter.
Personally, watching more casualties come in, I just couldn't stand by as both a veteran and then, as a Gold Star husband and say, like, I'm just going to.
As a veteran and a Gold Star husband, as a veteran, so invoking his, rest in peace, dead wife.
Continue to soldier on in this. It's time to try something different. I know this path that we're on, it doesn't work. I've seen enough data. It's time to do something different.
How hard a decision was that?
It became really clear to me, over the weekend, this
not a single critical question by Tucker here, pure propaganda.
Past weekend, that our message just wasn't getting through, and I was like, I know what happens if I stay. If I stay and I go along with this, I'm going to be knee deep in it, trying to just chip away and make a difference. But my ability to have my voice heard, to present data that runs contrary to the trajectory and the agenda that the administration's on, that's going to be squashed before it even really reaches the White House. And so I knew I had kind of hit my limit of effectiveness in that capacity. So really, it should have been a hard decision, but for me, it was crystal clear. It was like, number one, I can't be a part of this in good conscience, and I need to do everything I can to actually speak out about it, and speak out in a way that I hope resonates with the president and with some of my former colleagues. I understand they might be mad at me. They're getting hard questions from the media, but I really want.
Real quick, I want to shout out Rob Noor, by the way. What do you think? Rob Noor, my God, what to say about the guy? He cast himself as principally a populist. That's how he cast himself. He said that, he would never vote for Nikki Haley because Nikki Haley is just going to get us involved in foreign regime change wars. He accused Democrats of being hawkish. He accused Democrats, people who supported Kamala, of being in principle in favor of war and intervention, which he says he stands in principle against. And what are his streams about? His streams are about fucking the fraud by this Nick Sorter video, which I haven't even watched yet, but based on how the first video went, almost certainly uncovered no additional fraud. Almost certainly is just a hit piece that is filled with half-truths, mistruths, or outright falsehoods, right? Where is the big energy from Rob Noor, from this guy, this populist guy who's against foreign regime change wars? You know how he says it? He says, I don't like it. I never liked it. Is it possible that it turns out right? I guess. But I was going to say, my first thing, I don't like it. Where is the fire? Right? That's what they said. Oh, you don't have fire when Biden does something corrupt or when Biden does something wrong. Not true. Not true. You've seen me have that fire. Where is the principled anger? The principled anger in line with this ideological narrative that we've been sold. Instead, the focus isn't on the war, because of course that makes Trump look bad. The focus is on James O'Keefe, California fraud, Nick Sorter, that kind of shit. Is it Nick Sorter? What's the guy's name? I don't know. What's this dude's name? The journalist. Did I say Nick Sorter? I kind of meant the other guy, right? Not Nick Sorter. Nick Shirley. Yeah, that's it. My bad. Nick Sorter's another one, though.
Them as we descend even further into this war, I really hope that they take the time to reflect and to realize that we still have time to get out.
What is it with Nicks? Nick Shirley, Nick Shirley, Nick Sorter, Nick Fuentes. Is there something wrong with Nicks? Someone put that in the YouTube comment.
Get us out of this. And then also for the 77 million people who voted for President Trump, who voted for no new wars, who voted for the foreign policy that President Trump enacted in his first administration, the foreign policy that I described. I mean, President Trump's first foreign policy, the one that he ran on, the one that he destroyed the Republican neocon establishment on, was incredibly pragmatic. We're not saying, you have to be some kind of a pacifist. We are saying, though, that you have to be very, very deliberate and judicious in how you use force. And you also have to use the full scope of the American toolbox. You use diplomacy, you use...
Oh, yeah. When I say journalist, that was scare quotes implied when it comes to probably both Nick Sorter and Nick
our economic leverage. And again, this isn't something that I came up with.
The Knicks never had makings of a varsity athlete. What is that? Is that a meme? That's a Sopranos meme.
President Trump came up with this. President Trump enacted this. And this is why 77 million people voted for him. It's probably not the only reason. But the no new wars, put America first. Don't let us bleed out in the Middle East.
That's why people voted for Trump. Excuse me? Source? No, the prices, man. It's the prices. Of course.
That's what people voted for, and that's what I think you campaigned for, and I think that's something he could get us back to. If he,
they're still coping. Homeboy's still coping. He's coping. He thinks that Trump is going to reverse policies. If he does, it'll only be for his own benefit, not because he gives a shit about the voters.
You campaigned for, and I think that's something he could get us back to if he just takes a look and assesses how we got to where we are right now.
I want to get to that in a minute. Your solution, and I just want to be transparent about my motives. Not in this to attack anybody.
Right.
Why aren't you in it to attack anybody? I'm not in it to criticize anybody. I don't want to burn any bridges.
I'm concerned to the point of agitation.
I'm concerned to the point of agitation. What is it? Susan Collins talking to us? You're concerned? You're concerned? You're claiming that there's a shadowy cabal, the Israel donor industry, that is running all of our day-to-day stuff. Concerned to the point of agitation. I would be pretty critical. I don't know. Why are you holding back here, sir?
About where this is going and its effects on the United States. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe it. And I think you do too. I think this is the most serious thing that's happened in my lifetime. So,
this is dude gets more mad at the war on Christmas. What's going on? I don't see Jesus anymore. But when he's talking about the sensitive issue, he starts talking like it's Sam Harris on his podcast. And like therapy-wise, I don't want to make fun of anybody.
So I want to fix it, and I don't want to happen again.
Exactly.
And I don't want history to be written in real time by liars in such a way that no one understands what we're going through.
Name them, name them, name them.
And then we make the same mistakes. And this is a principle that any parent applies to his own children. No, say out loud what you did.
Every parent applies to
The
what?
same mistakes. And this is a principle that any parent applies to his own children. No, say out loud what you did. And you're less likely to do it again. So but before I say that, I just want to pause just on your personal experience. And I know you hate talking about this. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable by pushing too much, but
Hey, you don't need to have a trillion throat clearers before every fucking question.
you feel it. I feel it as an observer, such sadness for the men who've been used, including you. And I wonder how, given everything,
He needs to frame everything. He always needs to frame everything, even by the way, when his framing is completely false, as it often is, even when he's quote unquote on the right side of issues. Do libs and cis leftists don't care about Palestinians to cope with the fact that we were right about the genocide years before? No, when you do actions or when people do actions, not all leftists, it's not all leftists, not all leftists, and not all libs either. But when they insist on demanding from others actions that have no tendency to address what the material conditions of a group that they claim to care about, then that causes people to doubt, right? If, for example, you say, as I referenced when I made that statement, and I don't think that you have anything to say to it, Mr. Doctor, I would not vote for Kamala, even if I knew that single vote would save 20,000 Palestinians out of principle to not vote in favor of genocide. That causes me to say, I don't think you care about those people, because I think that that's an insane position to have. That demonstrates a lack of care for the people. That's what I was referencing. And I don't say it's true of all leftists. I think it's true of some leftists. I think most leftists are probably, voted for Kamala, believe in harm reduction, and probably absolutely care about the Palestinian people.
you've done and everything you've just said, how you don't feel bitter at the response that you've gotten from people, some people. How do you keep the bitterness out?
I think faith. I've got a great wife.
Listen, I do think that we should get along, but I will. The reason I get like, we should chill a little bit. All right, we should chill. I get a little triggers. Like, there's this insistence to get concessions and or statements of policy agreement on things that would be like bad for the Palestinian people. So you agree we were right not to vote for Kamala, right? You agree we were right to immediately want to invade Israel. I'm not saying anyone said that in this conversation. You shouldn't push people in the wrong direction. Certainly not me. I'm not going to sign on to policies that I think are not going to help situations. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Hey, we're all friends. You vote for Kamala. Not you. Not you.
God's blessed me twice with my late wife Shannon, my wife Heather, our two boys, Colt and Josh, who I think are watching this hopefully. So faith and staying grounded on what's important.
Shout out Colt and Josh if you're watching this. Shout out Colt and Josh.
Yes.
But then also look, the people who are coming after me. I believe that the internet is like 25% real. I think there's a lot of bots. There's a lot of.
I actually agree with this. I totally agree with this. I think that the internet is so not representative of the real world. I truly think that. I think that like Democrats and politicians and pundits need to engage more with new media, internet, all that stuff. But I think that there is a base of real world enjoyers, and it is not representative of them. The internet, that is.
People who got delivered a talking point and they're going to get a paycheck for it.
I've noticed.
Or they just, they want the
bots.
adoration.
And the bots, and then the Europeans, and the foreign bots, and the Europeans. When I see a European roll up, now it's different if I'm talking about the international issues. But when a European starts talking that Trump stuff, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I get this visceral anger. Also, by the way, true of like, the Asian, these various different countries. Who's this guy? I always forget his name. I think he lives in Dubai. Ian Miles Cheong.
So I just don't take most of it seriously. And again, look, I know there's some of my former colleagues, people who I do like, who have had to come after me. And I understand that too. Like, I get it. Like, they're still there. They've got to discredit everything.
JD Vance was pretty light. I'm going to share with you the statement on Joe Kent by JD Vance. This was a pretty passive statement. Hang on.
When the president, that said, whatever your view is, when the president of the United States makes it.
Oh wait, no, he had another intro. Hang on.
3 weeks ago. Now you asked about Joe Kent. Now I know Joe Kent a little bit. I like Joe Kent.
He likes Joe Kent, so he likes this person who said his administration was coerced by Israel, and who basically said, Trump, you're making a huge mistake. He likes him.
You heard the president of the United States say yesterday that he likes Joe Kent too.
You heard him say this, right? Always just statements of fact as opposed to statements of normative opinion.
But it's one thing to have a disagreement of opinion. I know the president very well. He welcomes differences of opinion. He likes.
The president likes when people disagree with him.
It when people express their views about what should happen. He listens to everybody. It's one of the great things I like about him is that whether you're the gardener at Mar-a-Lago,
Trump is open-minded,
or whether you're the Secretary of the State, the president cares about what you think about an issue. He recognizes that everybody has smarts and everybody has wisdom. That said,
meanwhile, he was never good on security. I never respected him on security.
Whatever your view is.
That said, so this is the critique of Joe Kent. All right. So this makes me feel that J.D. Vance and Joe Kent are aligned. All right.
That said, whatever your view is, when the president of the United States makes a decision, it's your job to help make that decision as effective and successful as possible.
What a nothing statement.
So the president said this yesterday. If you are on the team and you can't help implement the decisions of his administration, he has the right to make those decisions, then it's a good thing for you to resign. And I think that's exactly right.
That is the equivalent of Tulsi's statement, which is essentially the president has the right to do the foreign policy thing. The president has the right to do the foreign policy thing. They are spineless. They're totally spineless. And JD, that is not a criticism of Joe Kent. He's just like, it's good you leave the administration, like a hostage situation. It's good you leave the administration if you don't effectually implement the president's directive. I like Joe Kent. That said, the president said he likes him too. But the decisions that we're making, and the decisions are ultimately the president's decisions, and that's the job, is to implement a decision. They are in a tough situation. J.D. Vance is in a tough situation politically. If he comes out hard against the policy, it's untenable. He can't stay as vice president and think that he has any future. And also, it'll undermine him and jeopardize him for 2028, which is the only thing he's thinking about. If he fully embraces the position, he's still trying to pussyfoot with Groypers and this Twitter class. He doesn't want to lose them. But this strategy, I think, is folly. And I think it's folly for him and Tulsi. I think Rubio is picking a lane, right? Some of these other people are picking a lane. Joe Kent, I think, like JD, is trying to have it both ways. Still, JD is like the one step away from Joe Kent, but it really does feel like they're aligned. But not on principle. They're aligned in terms of self-protection, self-enrichment, and a political future.
I'm saying right now, they're watching, taking notes. So I'm not bitter about that. I literally just want to focus on the task at hand. And the task at hand is stopping us from getting deeper into this quagmire. Because again, like just looking back on my experiences in Iraq, I don't feel like this happened. There wasn't the ability to, there wasn't this platform, there wasn't, the free independent media that existed in any real way that could reach people.
That's right.
And so to me, we have this opportunity. So I'll be back.
You're talking to one of the biggest cheerleaders of the regime change wars under Bush. You're talking to one of the biggest cheerleaders. That's Tucker Carlson, who stood by Bush. And then talking about, well, we didn't have the power to speak to the American people. Tucker did. Tucker had a fucking show on CNN. We all remember.
Bitter and angry later when, I read Twitter and somebody who I used to like says that Joe Kent's a traitor and we're going to fire him tomorrow anyways. We don't have time for that. Like, as you pointed out, major things are happening right now in this war, and the president is facing some very, very challenging decisions. So I personally just...
He's facing some challenging decisions. I thought all his decisions were being made by Israel, bro. Doesn't sound like he's making much decisions at all. Doesn't sound like, on your view, he's getting information from the alleged anti-war people, the phonies like Tulsi Gabbard or J.D. Vance.
hope that he and his closest
Okay, he says he regrets it. All right, he regrets it, and then he supports another war hawk like Trump.
advisors listen and think, and that's the main priority.
So I strongly agree, and we can't allow hatred of us to inspire hatred in ourselves. You can't become a hater; it'll just.
They become zen. They become so fucking zen. We can't let hate dominate, bro. The things I want to say.
It's what they want. So I salute you for avoiding that, and it's absolutely real. I spent a lot of time with you, and you're not a hater at all. You don't even seem that bothered. So that's incredible, given where you are. It's amazing. It's an act of faith, and I love it.
It's an act of faith. It's religion. These guys have no boundary. They have no boundary.
End of the history portion of the segment, but I just think it's important to establish why you said
the glaze is unreal.
First, the war in Iraq. Second, the conflict in Syria, which took the life of your wife. Why both of those were driven by Israel?
Well, the war in Syria never would have happened without the war in Iraq. I mean, so had we not gone in and invaded Iraq, we wouldn't have had the conflict in Syria. But Syria was always a major problem under Assad for the Israelis, both under his father and under the Bashar al-Assad, Hassan Bashir, because of their support, the relationship with the Iranians, their support for Hezbollah.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yep.
And so they wanted to get rid of Assad as well. They saw.
And you supported that as well. That's in the first term Trump struck the Assad government, and Obama didn't do that, and you supported that.
Iraq as a vehicle for not just taking down Saddam.
By the way, it need not be said, but fuck Assad. Fuck Assad. Fuck Assad.
Hussein, who posed a threat to them as well, but also as a way, a lily pad, if you will, to get rid of Syria. And basically...
So Assad must go, which was a slogan that all of a sudden emerged out of nowhere.
Right.
That was not like an organic American desire. It wasn't like Americans woke up and were like, the problem really is this ophthalmologist from Syria. He must go.
The brutal dictator during the Arab Spring, when everyone was focused on that, absolutely, that was not just an Israel op. I don't know. They're buying a version of the Groyper narrative. They're trying to repackage Fuentes and say Israel behind Iraq, Israel behind Syria, Israel behind Arab Spring, Israel behind this. And it's there's absolutely truth that Netanyahu was pushing the Iraq war. There's absolutely truth that Netanyahu and Israel have pushed America into this war. No doubt about that, in a disgraceful way. And they absolutely should be condemned for that. I think Israel's funding should be completely cut off. I find it totally disgusting. Democrats should not take any AIPAC funding whatsoever. But putting that aside, like, this narrative is just false. It's just this ophthalmologist, this eye doctor. Americans care about. No, he was a brutal dictator.
That reflected the priorities of Israel, not
Israel, and then I think you had the echo chamber as well, because
I actually think it is in America's interest. I think all of this is in America's interest. The question is, what action is justified in light of those interests? This is a key region. I'm not saying that there's no American interest there. Is the action taken in America's interest? But just be like, oh, who cares if we have brutal dictators? I know I just took AIPAC money. True, Tolly.
You had all the usual suspects. You had FDD, and you had all these different other organizations that were out there saying that, like, now's the time to, break off
Barry Weiss,
break off the shackles.
Expert on Syria.
The next thing you know, like, there'll be a Syrian Thomas Jefferson that'll take over, and instead we got the former leader of Al Qaeda.
So this is just my Barry Weiss. Like, they spend more time so far in this criticizing Barry Weiss than Donald Trump so far, the leader of the country, the one who initiated the war.
A big reason that Syria became next after Iraq. In Iraq, we screwed the whole thing up so badly that we toppled Saddam, destabilized, fought a bitter insurgency. The Sunnis eventually aligned with Al Qaeda, but then we beat them down so heavily because the Shias are the majority of the country. The Shias took over. Shias largely, the Shias that we installed in Iraq, the Dawa Party, Badr, Skiri, et cetera, heavily aligned with Iran. And so at the end of the Iraq war under Obama, there was this whole like, oh crap, we just handed basically the keys to Baghdad to the Iranians.
That, by the way, was foreseeable too. People were talking about that too. That, notwithstanding the fact that Saddam Hussein is a brutal dictator, notwithstanding the fact that, the dude committed genocide on the Kurds, notwithstanding the fact that he launched aggressive wars and at a time absolutely deployed and used and was seeking weapons of mass destruction. No doubt about that. There was a sense by people in this sphere that it would lead to a vacuum that Iran would take advantage of. And that is what happened.
Who, again, hostile to us. Qasem Soleimani is running all over the place, funding proxies. It's a great deal. It helps Iran circumvent sanctions, the relationship with Iraq. And we just spent trillions, lost nearly 5,000 Americans there. And now we have this Shia superstate. And so then there was a ton of pressure coming from not just the Israelis, but I think also a lot of the Gulf to say, hey, we've got to get rid of Assad as well. Because now you have this Iranian land bridge that goes basically from Damascus all the way to Tehran, and then you can hook that down into the Lebanese area where Hezbollah is.
Southern Lebanon.
So next thing you know, well, if you want to get rid of the guy Assad, who's an Alawite, well, you got a country full of like really angry Sunnis, and what are those guys going to turn into? And so next thing you know, we're now on the side of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. ISIS gets out of control, and we have to deploy back to Iraq, back to Syria, to put out essentially the brush fire that we created. And so that's why I put all of those together. Because again, without Israel's influence, would all of this have happened? Would the Iraq War have happened? Maybe, but
Maybe. So now we're blaming the Iraq War on Israel. Next, we're going to be blaming 9/11 on Israel too. This was America's war. The Iraq War was America's war. There were some elements in Israel that supported it, but it wasn't uniform. And there was plenty with respect to American intelligence that was the basis of the initial push to get us involved in Iraq. And this was a goal of the administration even prior to 9/11. They were talking about it. I mean, to cast this all in terms of Israel, it's just not true. It's Republican pornography. It's rewriting our history. It's fucking offensive. It's the Republicans who come in, fuck up the economy, start wars, lower taxes on the richest of people. And I'm so done, whether it's on the left or the right, to massage these people and create a fake narrative, whether it's Cenk Uygur doing it, or whether it's these bozos who were both involved in the lead up to the war, now saying Israel, Israel, Israel. No, how about you own up to it? I'm just repeating myself time and time.
Heavily lobbied for it. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu, you can pull up tapes on YouTube. Like the guy was lobbying heavily back in 2002 for us to do regime change in Iraq. And he has stayed in power ever since. Ariel Sharon, who initially was the PM in the lead up to the Iraq War, initially was against it because he wanted us to focus on Iran. But then towards the end, he got on board as well. But the Likud party that's in power and has been driving Israeli politics now for most of my adult life, they were heavily in favor of the regime change war in Iraq, which again led to Shia domination, led to the rise of ISIS, led to the rise of
just like you were, just like Tucker was, just like you guys were.
And then heavily fueled the Syrian civil war. So again, this country, Israel, who they can be a good partner in some regards. I'm not anti-Israeli. I've worked with the Israelis. Again, very competent intelligence service, very wonderful people, but they have different objectives than we do. So to put them in the driver's seat of our foreign policy and to let them dictate our foreign policy is a disservice to the American people.
Well, I think, and I think you're understating the effect. Disservice suggests like an inconvenience.
It's dangerous. Yeah.
Now we're looking at bankruptcy and death and collapse of the dollar.
Bankruptcy. Okay, now who's bankruptcy? Maybe among Americans. And maybe that's what he's referencing. So that I buy. I buy that this could have the potential to have significant economic effects. So if that's what he's referring to. But I don't think this, like, American people who sell you this, like, America will collapse. America, in my opinion, is not going to collapse as a result of this war. It will be a heavy strain, and it will be borne by the taxpayer, and it will be borne by people who have to deal with higher prices. It'll be borne by the young men and women that we go send to be, killed and shot at. So the cost is going to be huge and significant. But I don't really buy this whole notion that it's like existential for us specifically. What could be existential is if we allow the authoritarians to continue to, run roughshod over our country.
Like lots. And I'm not blaming Israel. By the way, I'm not blaming Israel for any of it. I'm blaming supine American leadership.
Supine.
I'm not blaming Israel for any of it. I'm blaming supine American leadership that.
Oh my God! It's like the euphemisms don't end. When this guy has this little frowny face, he's full of shit. I'm not blaming Israel even, and then he realized what he got himself into. Right? Look at his face.
I'm not blaming Israel for any of it. I'm blaming.
Pause. Oh fuck! Supine American leadership. Supine. Look at his face.
I'm not blaming Israel. By the way, I'm not blaming Israel for any of it. I'm blaming supine American leadership that takes this. I don't understand it at all.
You don't? You don't understand it?
And that kind of leads to the most uncomfortable question of all, and I don't know if you can answer it. I don't think I can answer it.
Please push it. Please push it.
But since all of these dynamics are very well known to everyone in Washington, everyone who pretends this is not real,
Get to it.
The Tom Cottons,
Can I praise you at least once in this entire thing, Tucker?
the world Lindsey Grahams or whatever, the liars. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Pro-Israel people know, anti-Israel people know that what you're saying is true. I don't think there's any debate about any of it. So since it was clear that we were being pushed by the Netanyahu government into this war, that they were choosing the timing, they chose the timing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Why are you asking questions you already know?
I'll take Marco Rubio's word for it.
I'll take Marco Rubio's word for it. Was it ever discussed, the option that you mentioned at the beginning, like, how about no?
You've already asked this question, Tucker. How much longer are you going to beat around the bush? You already asked this question. Were people saying no? And he already told you. What a joke.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so then you have to ask, I'm just following
All right, let's get
the
there.
logic train here.
Everyone knows the logic.
What kind of pressure does it require to get a president who campaigned against exactly this thing for 10 years to do
We're getting dangerously close to the point.
exactly this thing? What does it take to do that?
I wish I knew definitively. I think there's two potentials or two schools of thought. I mean, one is the media echo chamber, the donors, the way the Israeli.
The donors. It's like you only blame one side of the donor class issue. At a bare minimum, Cenk will go after the politicians who are taking money from the quote unquote donor class, right? But this is all a way of repackaging the Israel critique. And they're like flirtatiously getting to the point, but not quite touching it to see how close they can get.
Please come in and kind of launder the information like I described previously. And then the other option is much darker. I mean, we still don't know
what is
happened
it
in Butler.
Oh my God. Wait, they're not going to do this shit. Are they really? So maybe this is why everyone's going crazy about this.
The other option is much darker. I mean, we still don't know what happened in Butler.
We don't? What don't we know about what happened in Butler?
We don't know what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Okay, this guy wants to be a podcaster.
And by no means am I saying the Israelis did this or any of that. But
What are you saying? We don't know what Charlie Kirk was killed. We have an indictment. We are pursuing a case. Evidence is going to be put on. The Butler situation, what are we missing there? I'm not saying it was Israel. You just okay, how does Israel have this influence over the president? Well, on the one hand, you have the elites and donors. On the other hand, we still don't know what happened to Butler or Charlie Kirk. So you're absolutely positively Groiper-pilled on some level, but you don't want to go full. You don't want to go full. You want to be a podcaster or to carve a political lane on bullshit, on conspiracy that is not based in fact. So you're a scumbag piece of shit. You're trying to grift, potentially, like Canis is. Or you're delusional. But I think it's probably, these guys, I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. After we saw what Tucker was writing in the Dominion lawsuit, this is all a performance. This is all a fake. This is fake. This is for naive people.
I'm saying there's a lot of unanswered, and by no means am I saying the Israelis did this or any of that, but I'm saying there's a lot of unanswered questions there.
What are the unanswered questions?
There is enough data to at least say that there's a good chance that President Trump feels like he is under threat.
By Israel. So do you want to know the cope of how to remove agency from Trump? The reason we can remove agency from Trump and refrain from criticizing Trump, this is all a way, guys, this is all like a J.D. Vancian style grift to try to have it all ways. The way they can try to remove agency from Trump is Trump is trying to preserve his life. He feels threatened by Israelis, and so he's going to do their bidding. They have our country under the threat of assassination. of Trump, and that's why things are happening. You see why I say these are malign actors? I don't put it past Tucker to be a foreign unregistered agent. These guys are disgusting. Totally disgusting. And it's not about telling the truth. Remember, Tucker starts his whole thing about the truth. These guys are the worst, the absolute worst, because now they're going to take advantage of an illegal, unjustified war. And they're going to continue to feed bullshit to their credulous audiences to try to profit off of it. You think that Trump's... And what are you basing that determination on, Joe? Do you think Tucker's going to ask him? I hope he does, but he'll be so gentle when he does.
We're not allowed to ask, basically, was there any linkage between...
We're not allowed to ask the question. We're not allowed to ask the question. The fuck you're not allowed to ask the question? People are making millions asking the question. And frankly, I am concerned about anti-Semitism. Because rather than getting the true and accurate Israel critique, which is absolutely of note, and that puts them in a prominent position in terms of the bullshittery that we as a country are dealing with, instead of that, you sell fake news, fake conspiracy, just like all these other disgusting figures like Candace Owens. And people are allowed to ask that question. Again, this whole pretending to be a cringing minority. You guys are the scum of the earth. You're making millions of dollars doing it. Just like Candace. Just gross, man.
We're not allowed to ask, basically, was there any linkage between what took place with Asif Merchant, who was recruited by the Iranians to come to America to recruit proxies to kill President Trump. The FBI put a confidential human source out.
The Iranian, right? Or sorry, I think this guy was, I could be confusing the people, but I think this guy was convicted of being directed by the IRGC. I think he admitted to it. That's an Iranian conspiracy.
All this is public.
I think that's true.
Now, this is all out there in the open. And he's arrested, and then 2 days later, a sniper takes a shot at President Trump. We think Merchant and we know the CHS was talking about the human source that the FBI put at Merchant. They were talking about, hey, we could kill the president potentially with a sniper.
So you're saying that that was a long con by Israel with no evidence. That's why I can't stand when Jake and Anna glaze this motherfucker. Like, it's so disgusting. These people are scumbags.
Rifle. But then they arrest him. 2 days later, Butler happens. And Crooks, according to the official narrative anyways, is an enigma. We don't know anything about him. We can't get into his devices. If we did get into his devices, maybe there's nothing there. No more questions are allowed to be asked about Thomas Crooks. The DHS IG is currently being blocked from investigating Butler as well. That's out in the media. That's all well known. Your investigative journalist found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona,
quite an
online
extensive
footprint.
one.
And he was talking to people. So it's like, why aren't we investigating this? I mean, if
an attempted murder of a presidential
attempted
candidate?
murder of a presidential candidate, and then
we had a whole indictment and trial about it. I mean, there was an entire trial with someone with the conspiracy where he was found guilty. I imagine they are investigating Crooks. Is there any info? You guys just sound like you're just now arriving at the situation, and the only addition you have just is this classic Tucker. Oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. Why aren't we allowed to talk about this? Beats me. I don't know. This is the most important person in the world. Why can't we talk about it? I don't know. We should. It's just the classic Tucker shtick. This is what he's made his entire career off of. And he's just doing it again now it's a more consistent audience. I think the worst thing possibly that the Trump administration could do is to charge Tucker. If we're just looking at this from like a purely political, pragmatic standpoint, I think it'll make him a martyr and it will increase his profile.
And there's another assassination attempt. There's been multiple public breaches of President Trump's.
I mean, no, there wasn't a trial for Butler, but that doesn't mean there wasn't an investigation for Butler. I'm pretty sure that there is active investigations on Butler.
Security over the last year. And then, Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way. And we're not really even allowed to look into that at all.
We're not allowed to look into the Charlie Kirk. What do you mean we're not allowed to look into it? Everyone is talking about it still. You guys are having a civil war about it. Candace is releasing like a 5-part documentary just on how his wife is. Look at what the discourse on the Erica Kirk watch, like the Erica Kirk narrative on how she's reacting to her husband's death.
Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway, and I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space, and he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran." Very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that, it's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that.
That's the first challenging question asked by Tucker. What do you mean by that?
When you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe.
What do you mean we're not allowed to ask questions?
He is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI, I will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying.
No, I don't think you are.
You're not an investigatory agency, right? I just don't understand. Like, is it usual for you to be running the investigation into like the National Counterterrorism Center to be doing that? I don't. Are they an investigatory agency? And also, yeah, it raises the question: did Kash Patel stop them? That's just another one of those. Like, okay, well, then who stopped you? Linkage. Charlie Kirk, and to my brother Charlie Kirk. Rest now. We have the watch.
Because
drinks a fucking skulls of beer with the hockey team. Oh my God, what a clown! This entire administration.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure.
Okay, for the Crooks thing, I'm finding some things. The FBI concluded its investigation in November 2025. Why is that inappropriate? Why is that insufficient on Crooks? The DHS also had its own internal investigation. Why is that insufficient? Right? Like, if you say that the investigation is insufficient, you need to say why. The House had its own investigation. They released a bunch of material. So there needs to be like an accounting as to why the investigations are insufficient.
From a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, that
now he's doing this bit. So he was asked by Tucker, what do you mean we're not allowed to ask questions? And he's just like, well, I guess they were asking for all the evidence to give it, and it was sensitive because there's a trial that needs to happen. That means we're not allowed to ask questions. Him being like, hey, just we have to try this guy for murder, and it's not clear to me that you have any role in terms of criminal investigations. You are a counterterrorism expert. Are you a domestic law enforcement guy? You're supposed to be preventing terrorism, right? Maybe leave that to the investigators. I mean, I don't know. I mean, can you explain why this guy's portfolio is tracking the motives of gunmen?
Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again.
Right.
So we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Can I just ask you to pause on the Charlie Kirk?
He's literally doing the Glenn Beck meme. The Glenn Beck meme of just putting different bullet points and trying to draw these tenuous connections and these implications of just asking questions. It's a meme. It's just another Another form of grift.
Just because it upsets me to
me too.
hear what you're saying, to be reminded that he was murdered, but also to hear you confirm what was reported in the media several months ago, that your office had been blocked from investigating his murder. That does not make sense to me. I don't understand why you would ever turn down help in an investigation from a U.S. agency with a lot of experience in gathering intelligence on things. That's your job.
The FBI will say, and the DOJ will say, that because it's an ongoing case, it's a Utah State case, that back off, they've got it. They've got a smoking case. They've got the fingerprints on the gun. And
Yeah, because what happens if you just start talking out of your ass? What happens if you start raising questions and you jeopardize the prosecution of Robinson? That could be like bad, because this guy clearly murdered Charlie Kirk. And there's no, what's the alternative theory? That it was the French and with this, they planted this guy who claimed it that he was the one who took the shot. Remember that guy? And I think that guy's now been charged with CSAM or whatever. But what's the other theory?
And they've got the kid.
But the FBI was involved in the case.
The FBI was involved. The FBI's basically said that they're deferring to Utah because it's now a state case.
They've established a precedent for federal investigation of this crime.
Yeah, and the National Counterterrorism Center's mandate is to investigate any foreign ties, to see if there's potentially any foreign ties. If we don't find any foreign ties, we back off. What I'm saying, without getting into too much detail, is there was more for us to investigate.
You believe there was reason to investigate foreign ties to Charlie Kirk's murder, and were told by the FBI, DOJ?
FBI and DOJ, yeah.
No, you're not allowed to investigate that.
I would kill to see the comms here.
Stop. It's done. They basically cut off our access to be able to get into that information. And look, I didn't even say necessarily that I believe there's 100% foreign ties. There were data points that we needed to investigate. I mean, I think anybody who's even looked at any kind of police investigation, you get 100 leads, you run them down, and 99 don't mean anything. We still had a lot more leads to run down that pertained to some kind of a foreign nexus that we were stopped from investigating. And
that just strikes me as
So now the FBI is implicated in trying to cover for Israel.
inconceivable that could happen. And again, I was aware of it from reading about it, but not really to the extent that you've just described. So I would love to hear the justification for that. And can you flesh that out a little bit more? What were you told was the reason to prevent you, as a federal intelligence official running the National Counterterrorism Center, from looking into the murder when you had reason to look into it?
Well, the way the bureaucracy works is they can just kill things in process. So initially we were cut off pretty early on from being able to access like the files and being able to send people out there. We sent people out initially to work in the task force.
So do you have any basis to believe that there's a tie? It's just like early on, they say like, fuck off.
After the crisis period, the first week or so, that dispersed. And we basically were told that, hey, we'll get back to you if we find any kind of foreign ties, et cetera.
So the way he paints it, it's like, oh, we found these fruitful leads and we were really getting somewhere. And then all of a sudden they shut us down, right? That's how he presented it at first. And this seems more like, very early on, they're like, listen, we'll let you know if we need to call you in, bro. And that's sketchy. And why is it sketchy?
We want you guys to look into. Meanwhile, we had already dug up a decent amount of leads. Again, I'm not saying that we had anything concrete, but we found more work that we needed to do to say that.
Totally non-specific, totally like, okay.
That we had done our due diligence. We were then told that, hey, you guys need to stop. You can't work on this anymore. I had a bureaucratic dispute about it. Eventually, we were allowed to continue to investigate. But then in very short order, all the requests that we would make that normally different parts of the interagency with the FBI being on point would facilitate data sharing. Data sharing is a big thing that NCTC does. Those requests were just never met, or in my opinion, not an honest effort was given to fulfill those requests. Just basic information that any competent police service, which I believe Utah has, and the FBI, that they would have access to help us run down the leads to either confirm or deny some kind of foreign activity. So we were cut off from that. They didn't ever officially come back and say, you can't look at this anymore. All of the requests just continued to die on the vine with the various agencies that we needed to actually fulfill those requests.
I just can't imagine a legitimate justification for that. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but from a non-specialist perspective, something horrible has happened. The U.S. government, its core function is to investigate crime, particularly murder.
So they're stoking the theories here. That's actually what they're doing.
Here you have an agency
without any basis to do. Like, we haven't heard the other side, and always keep in mind, like, these kinds of bureaucratic, you might say, or interagency issues, fighting for jurisdiction, that is not, to me, inherently abnormal at all. And I do not feel comfortable. But people will draw the conclusion that the government is covering up Charlie Kirk's murder. That's what people will draw. Millions of people.
Whose job it is to to run down the rabbit trails you've described, and you're stopped from doing that. We don't want the information.
Right.
Why would any person engaged in a legitimate pursuit say, I don't want more information?
I mean, especially considering there was people posting online prior knowledge of what was about to happen. So a lot of...
What? Oh, you mean the people? Yeah. So there was, but those were investigated. Those were investigated. I remember those. Yeah.
A lot of the justification for stopping us from investigating hung on, hey, we've got the guy, his fingerprints are on the gun. We got video of him jumping off the roof. Like, this is a slam dunk case. Okay, even if it is a slam dunk case that he took the shot, what about all the people who had prior knowledge? You know, all this, the basic investigative questions of like, how did he get there?
Those people were run down when they were posting. Yeah, I remember that.
You map it out. You know, nothing. This isn't rocket science. I mean, this is anything that anyone with common sense would know to ask. But basically, once they caught him, once he turned himself in and his fingerprints were on the gun, it was basically pencils down. Utah has the rest of it. There's nothing else to see here. And, you know, I'm over there thinking I'm in crazy town saying like, no, we have all these different leads that we need to run down just from my perspective. Now, the people who had prior knowledge, I believe most of them were American citizens. So that would be on the FBI to go run down. But again, not without saying anything specific, there was more work for us to do on the potential of a foreign nexus. Again, not saying there is one, but we had more work to do and we were blocked from doing that.
I can't, my heart is pounding listening to this. I just want people listening to this to assess two things. One, are you over your skis? Are you making claims you can't prove? No.
Yes.
No.
That's the implication, and you know what you're doing.
Two, is there any conceivable motive, dark motive, that you would have for wanting to know more about this murder, to wanting to investigate it? And I don't think any rational person could construct a bad motive for wanting to know. It's your job.
Yeah.
It's the government's job. And so I think the onus is on people who are preventing the collection of information to describe why they're doing that. That's the question for them. Why wouldn't you want to know? Specifically, you may not know the answer, of the people who demonstrated prior knowledge of Charlie Kirk's murder online, and there were a number of them, are you satisfied that all of them were interviewed by the FBI in person?
I have no idea. I don't know.
You don't know shit. You don't know shit, and you're coming in and assuming that you were blocked for bad reasons. And you're spouting off. I mean, this is disgraceful. I don't know anything. I don't know. Like, you should be the guy. Well, maybe you're not the guy. Maybe you're a water boy. Maybe you're a water boy. Maybe that's all you ever were.
I just think, considering they knew Charlie was going to be assassinated, and there was enough of them that it wasn't just some rando who maybe he tags every TPUSA post with that. There was enough of them that there's something there. I don't know what that something is.
There's something there. You're asserting now something that you literally can't prove. Literally.
By definition.
But we haven't.
By definition, there's something there. Like, what kind of, like, there's something there. Someone posted it. What the fuck does that mean? These guys know what they're doing, man.
It wasn't just some rando who maybe he tags every TPUSA post with that. There was enough of them that there's something there. I don't know what that something.
By definition,
there's by definition.
But we haven't seen any.
What the hell does that mean? Look at this motherfucker. Whenever he does that, whenever you see these frown lines, it is rhetorically effective. It is fucking scary. These people are scarcely human.
Arrests. So to me, there's more work to be done. And because that could have been posted from anywhere, that would be in the purview of the FBI or NCTC, or if they're overseas. And to me, I personally did not see any effort being taken to continue to run that down. Now, I'm sure they will say, hey, we're open to anything.
What the fuck do you know, Waterboy?
Continue to investigate. But, you know, we're coming up on several months now. Why hasn't this been done?
Are you bothered by it?
You don't know if it has or hasn't. You're not in the room.
I'm very bothered by it. I'm very bothered by it. Like I personally did not know Charlie well, but Charlie Kirk is a generational figure. I mean, he led a movement. He was speaking to millions of young Americans who came out and who voted for President Trump. And he was just a genuine great man, husband, father. I mean, how can you not like Charlie Kirk? But also the fact that he was murdered. So
maybe like you, he was like fascist scum who tried to destroy our country. That's why I don't like him. That's why I don't like you, among others.
Publicly. And yes, there's been a lot of sympathy, and his movement has grown, et cetera. But actual curiosity about getting to justice, to figuring out what happened, that makes me furious that we're being blocked from that, and that we're not allowed to ask the question anymore. We're just not allowed to talk about it anymore. And I think that's
You're not allowed to talk about this anymore. That's why you're talking about it. Yeah, we do need that Lisa Kudrow clip.
Absolute insanity. And what does that mean? What does that mean that there are people and there's entities out there that don't want us looking into this? And I'm sure they're preparing the response right now, and they're saying that's because we don't want to screw up the Robinson trial. Like, okay, if the Robinson trial is so slam dunk, then don't worry about it. You know, he's got his fingerprints on the rifle, et cetera.
That shows someone who's never, ever, ever litigated a criminal case before. Just win, five head. If it's so easy, why? Who cares if we're just fucking around and like just saying random shit?
But there was people publicly posting they had prior knowledge of this, and I'm.
Has there ever been a situation in which the National Counterterrorism Center has taken an investigatory role in a murder case? Is there any precedent for that? I've never. Maybe it happens. Like I've just never heard of that before. One, it's clearly a state case. I don't see where the federal nexus is, such that it would be a federal prosecution. Maybe it exists. Maybe there's something that you could tag them with, but it's clearly like a state case. Number one, and then number two, like, wouldn't we want the FBI to do this? The DOJ, like, and Tucker plays fast and loose with this all the time. He pretends to not know that we have a system of agencies that have different domains and different expertises. So it's not weird. It's not weird, for example, that the State Department under Mike Huckabee, even though fuck Mike Huckabee, wouldn't necessarily be involved in this guy who's being charged for the sting operation in Nevada, right? That Mike Huckabee wouldn't necessarily be fielding those kinds of claims. That would be DOJ, right? To the extent that there's any extradition situation. So, and Tucker plays fast and loose. He knows, man. He knows that the government is like that, and not everyone has access to everything.
You're telling you, as someone who's involved in the investigation, there was more stones for us to overturn. And every time we asked, we were blocked. And then they, leaked to New York Times. We had to blow up, and we had to throw them out of the room because they're crazy, et cetera.
Oh, okay. So that's maybe what happened. Thank you for at least putting the alternative theory.
So it's incredibly frustrating that there's not more, especially considering how pivotal Charlie was to the MAGA movement and to President Trump, that there hasn't been a more concerted effort to find the truth and to find justice.
Do you think there will be?
So you're accusing now, without saying it, right, Trump of presiding over an administration that's covering up the death of Charlie Kirk. Now, the one benefit to this is, like, I'm spending a lot of time kind of like, and like anxiety, I guess, or anger, or whatever you want to call my state of mind right now, like worrying about this kind of shit when it's self-destructive when it comes to the Republican Party, in my opinion, in a way, because no matter what, those kinds of questions are questions the administration doesn't want asked. But the reason I am not like necessarily celebrating that this kind of division is happening, even though like in the immediate short term, I think it's positive, is I see kind of like the longer term situation here where if we keep fostering and promoting and or letting these kinds of actors increase in popularity, I just see our society breaking apart more and more and more. I see Tucker as a kind of arsonist. He will burn down everything we care about if he gets to be, a major influencer, major figure, or potentially have political power.
I pray there is.
And yeah, I think it'll affect us ultimately.
I hope this helps. I know, you and I will probably take some flack for it.
I don't know why, and I doubt I'll be. Yeah, it's at a certain point. I've really tried not to say anything about it because I don't know the answers, but I want them to be found because I believe in justice and because I love Charlie. And but I think everything you have said, may be dismissed as crazy or evil. But tell me how. Right. With reference to the words you've just spoken, I don't see how someone could level a legitimate attack on you.
It's so sinister, man. It is so sinister. He is very good at it. He is like one of the most malicious actors.
It won't stop them. You mentioned the breaches of the president's security that have been reported. One that was reported, and I can't say whether it's true. I'm only asking to see if you know that it is true. But it's been reported that Prime Minister Netanyahu's security detail was caught twice by Secret Service attaching some kind of device to the president's Secret Service emergency response vehicle. I don't know if that's true. Have you heard that?
I've read it in the media. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think the president and the vice president and several members of the cabinet going out to dinner in D.C. and the Code Pink protesters having a heads up about that to rent the table. And that's hard to do. They had to figure out where they rent the table. They had to kind of get the restaurant on board to a certain extent. To me, that's kind of a almost like counting coup. It's a soft flex. It's a I can touch you whenever I want. It was Code Pink. They weren't going to do anything. We know they're just going to be kind of crazy and annoying. However, what does that mean? It means you've got real problems with your security detail. And then, a few weeks later, you have an armed police officer who's off duty, who's not part of the president's detail, come right up and shake the president's hand. And the guy's probably patriotic American, whatever. He probably just want to shake the president's hand legitimately. But that got a lot of publicity. And what does that mean? You know, and the president, again,
Guy wanted to shake his hand. What does that mean?
President Trump is very smart. I think President Trump has a gift
He's a dumbass.
for interpreting large sets of data.
Yes.
And
Oh
making
my God, give me a break.
very, very key strategic decisions.
So now they're glazing his strategic acumen after he just launched this war that they spent all this time criticizing. He's really good at getting data and interpreting data. They know they're lying.
And so when the president sees that he's got issues with his own security detail, when he sees what happened in Butler with the other assassination attempts, when he sees what happened
That's why he's scared into doing whatever Israel wants.
with Charlie, I think it's reasonable to believe that somewhere in his head he thinks that, like, maybe I don't have a choice. Maybe they could harm me or they could harm my family. And if they can't keep me safe, I believe the president deeply cares. I believe he's very courageous. I think if it was just a matter of he worried about his own physical safety, I don't think he cares. We saw that in Butler. But he does love his family, and he's got a big
So he's worried about his children and family, not himself. So they have to paint him as this. They have to keep with this ritual of glaze.
family. And so somewhere in his head, if they can't keep me safe, what about my family? So look, maybe the president was just simply deceived by the echo chamber we described, and that's how we got to this place. But it's also, there's a potential that there's an element of coercion, intimidation, whatever words you want to use there, that is also influencing his decision-making.
If you were assessing a similar situation in another country, a country not your own, and you as an expert on these questions, which obviously you are, I gave you the same data set you've just presented
He's really showing himself to be an expert
to
here.
me. And I said, would you say that's just crazy even to bring that up as a possibility?
Not at all. I mean, when you map out those data points, I would just say this moves from being a possibility to potentially, depending on how you look at it and interpret it, this could be a likelihood. It would be something
Yeah,
that
sounds like it shouldn't be president. It reminds me of that clip we saw of Lindsey Graham. Hey, Lindsey, why don't you just come out as gay so people stop blackmailing you? Again, it's just a joke. I have no proof of this accusation of blackmail or whatever, but maybe you shouldn't be president if you're getting blackmailed and shit.
we would debate rigorously, but nobody would dismiss it altogether. With all this data, it's not nothing. It's something that has to be looked into.
Or if not blackmailed, like threatened course.
Is it being looked into?
Again, I don't think it is. I think that with Butler, your investigative journalist found more about crooks than the entire government. And
The response I received from the FBI was so hostile that it confused me, and it still does confuse me a lot. It confuses me a lot since I didn't approach the question with anything like that in mind. I mean, we put this documentary out. We got information, the information you described. We got a lot of his online activity, which we've been told didn't exist. And this was not an attack on the FBI. This was, of course, during the last administration with a different director. So this was hardly a partisan hit job. This is the president of the United States who I campaigned for and voted for and have liked for many years. So, like, it's not an attack. And the response that I got was hysterical.
Yep.
That's not an overstatement.
Yep.
And it confuses me.
Yeah.
Have you had experiences like that?
There was a level of, just hostility coming from really the FBI. And some of it I think is just like rivalry, like, why are you looking over my shoulder? I got this. I'm very familiar with that. I mean, we're the same way in the military, so I got
I'm sure that's right.
Totally, I totally get that.
They were treating like you were in the Air Force kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, what do you know? Like, we're the FBI. Like, gotcha. But, we had a role to play, and the way that we were aggressively blocked from that, I found the hostility to be above and beyond what you would think that you'd find with just typical, rivalry, bureaucratic rivalry, turf wars, those types of things. Some of that was at play, but the level of, like, you cannot look at this. And then for them to escalate it, to attempt to get us kicked out of the case, that to me was very surprising. Same thing with Butler. When we first started asking questions about Butler, I thought,
Nice fucking bait. You get me to read this shit. I could slay all the neoliberal dragons on Medicare for all. I support Medicare for all. I support taxing the rich. What are you talking about? Money is involved. Nice bait.
because especially that happened under the Biden administration, that, hey, we would come in and we would get the truth because, the previous administration really screwed this thing up. And there just wasn't
I
curiosity.
voted for Bernie in 2020 and 2016 in the primary. One of my favorite politicians, AOC.
There wasn't curiosity and there wasn't a tolerance whatsoever for us going after just the key questions of, like, hey, did the informant that you had that was interacting with this guy, Rashad, was he in communication with anybody in Butler? I mean, basic questions to ask. Again, this is nothing that's going to blow any investigator's socks off. Just those basic questions. Like, no, the two aren't related. Like, you can't.
Now they're just looping. Now they're just
even when we found data actually needed to be looked at. Yeah, I mean, they would say at the time, like, well, the Merchant case is
why don't you take Hutch to I mean, are you serious? We have plenty of disagreements. It's usually not a policy show. But yeah, I don't know. Like, we don't typically have those policy level arguments. It's usually about, like, how to market and what stances to publicly take and shit. So just because we haven't had that conversation doesn't mean I don't support those policies. You fucking idiot.
And if that case is over. So I mean, at this point,
I don't understand. I think this is like a new rule, which is to say a fake rule that you're not allowed to gather information about anything that might.
You're ready. You have a con law final tomorrow. Hey. What is the thing that you most don't understand, con law? You're ready. All right, we'll do some questions. Well, shit has changed since my day because of the current court. But I'll ask you. Let's see. What would you have learned? Oh, okay. So, can you give an example of a case where, on constitutional grounds, the government failed rational basis review? Yeah, there's a constitution, I know. Rational basis review. When has the government failed that in a constitutional case? It's an equal protection case.
Potentially intersect with an ongoing case that's not directly related? Like, who made that up?
I think that's just made up. I don't, because then how do you ever investigate anything?
What law school did you go to? And I asked this question and was like, yeah, cases have been overturned on this basis. And it's like, well, cases have been overturned on many bases, but how is that? Is this like the new standard? Because you would not be able to investigate anything.
Right, exactly. We want to get to the truth. And
so what is that for those of us following along at home who don't have a high level of familiarity with the process? What could that possibly be? The current president was the subject of a near successful assessment.
Well, you didn't do rights at all. Oh, okay. You didn't do any rights? You didn't do equal protection? Okay, let's do something else then. Did you guys do... Okay. Did you guys do power stuff? I mean, I assume you would have had to, right? You guys do any like Article 3 stuff? Article 3 memes? What'd you do?
Assassination attempt like recently.
Yeah.
And we're just not going to look into very obviously or divulge information that everyone knows they have. For example, the surveillance tape from the shooting range at which Thomas Crooks trained, because it would answer the question, was he training with somebody? And if so, who? They have that footage and they won't release it. What could possibly be the explanation for that?
Okay, 1 second.
I know what the result is. The result is people come to their own conclusions, and this is where like crazy conspiracy theories come from. And then those conspiracy theories usually are easy to debunk or make people saying them sound crazy. So then the actual question never gets answered.
Right? I'm sorry, can you say that for people who haven't lived in Washington? Okay, I try to explain this to people all the time because this has been ongoing since at least the Kennedy assassination. But this is a very serious and reoccurring thing. It's a tactic, and you just explained it better than anyone ever. Can you just do that again if you can recall it from memory?
Yeah, I mean, so basically you give no information whatsoever on something that's obvious there should be information. Like you outlined, like there's potentially footage of Crooks at the shooting range. Again, Police 101, go get the tapes. Let's figure it out. If you don't want to address that question, then you go silent and you say you can't ask that question, which then creates people who come out of kind of nowhere and they start drawing their own conclusions.
Right.
Let's name some cases. Can you describe the Lochner era? And then, okay, describe the Lochner era, and then give me a Commerce Clause decision. Give me 2 Commerce Clause decisions that rejected the purported exercise of legislative authority post Lochner.
The way the internet works, I mean, half of them, or if not more, are probably going to be so far off in left field and made by legitimate kooks or bots that then you can just be like, oh, these people asking these questions about that tape at the video range.
It's space
They're
aliens.
All crazy conspiracy theorists. They say it's a UAP or whatever. And so then you've just diverted all attention away from the thing that you're trying to conceal, and now everyone's focused on the crazies. Man. And then the second one.
So I support those policies, but I'm not a policy, like my focus and my expertise is in these kind of structural issues, the legal issues, and the kind of like reform related to the judiciary. That's kind of my bread and butter. I can make the argument when it comes to public health care and shit, but I'm sure I wouldn't be as effective as other people. But I mean, if you really want us to schedule that debate, I don't know. Has Hutch said that he's not in favor of public health care, universal health care, or Medicare for all?
That's a legitimate question. They're crazy.
I hope everyone watching will just clip that tape and keep it.
It actually is complicated. Like, you guys think that everything is resolvable, and again, I have to use this phrase again in a paragraph. Like, it's not just like, oh, public health care, Medicare for all, like, it's just the best just because more people get it. It actually does require some thought, and the healthcare industry in this country is incredibly complicated. And so it's not just like, oh, it's so complicated, whatever. Like, it is actually complicated.
And replay it every day, because that is one of the primary ways that the intel agencies and federal law enforcement influence public opinion, influence elections. That's the way they influence the perception of what's going on. But more than anything, it's the way that they hide their own behavior from the public.
Yeah.
So at the beginning,
Well, no, Wickard v. Filburn that didn't strike down the congressional action, right? It upheld it. Wickard v. Filburn upheld the exercise of government authority over poor farmer Filburn, right? I was looking for U.S. v. Lopez or Sebelius. Those are cases where they struck down the Gun-Free School Zone Act, I think. And Sebelius, obviously, from a commerce clause perspective, did not approve of the Affordable Care Act. I guess that's half credit because I guess they upheld it as a tax or whatever.
Of the administration, I think it was it was January 23rd, it was like right after the inauguration, the president issued an executive order calling for the total declassification, release of all documents relevant to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963, all of them, and also documents relevant
I didn't see this. Is this true? Thank you for
to the assassination investigation into Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General. I don't think all the Kennedy documents have been released, have they?
They were supposed to be. I mean, that was the president's order. That's what was in the executive order.
It's the law.
So first of all, Medicare doesn't cover everything, right? They're usually, if you're a recipient of Medicare, you need to have additional plans, supplemental insurance plans. So Medicare is not enough. It's one of our biggest expenditures from a fiscal perspective, and it's not it's a super complicated question to weigh the cost benefit there. Now, I happen to think in net the kind of additional bargaining gauge that the government has, the economies of scale, the universality of coverage will have some effect to drive the price down, but it doesn't mean increasing taxes massively. And that all needs to be accounted for. And there's going to be an immediate, massive extension of expenditure. So it's a complicated issue. It's just complicated. Does this extend to just citizens? Are there options to get, private insurance? It's not as simple as you think. What about the pharmaceutical industry? So again, I just don't think there's we already have Medicare, bro. Yeah, it's it's not a universal system. It's one of our biggest expenditures. It absolutely is not sufficient for most people, and prices are going up when it comes to healthcare expenditures. So I don't have answers for all the comebacks.
It's the president said it, and it's in the executive order.
Maybe you can't go there because
So
I just want to say again, and not from you, I have been told conclusively that has not happened. So without divulging anything that's classified, like anything from 1963 should be classified. The whole thing is insane and an insult to citizens. I'm a middle-aged man. I wasn't even born then. It was 6 years before I was born, and they're telling me I can't see it? Okay. It's infuriating, and it's the end of democracy. But what could possibly be the justification for keeping classified a document that must under law be released and that was produced generations ago?
Yeah. I think more of this goes to the deep state, the system, the machine, whatever you want to call it. They're not hiding something in the Kennedy files, in my opinion, because it's not like the assassins wrote down on this day we're going to kill JFK and they put it in a file at CIA or FBI.
Right.
That didn't happen. So I don't really think there's anything that's in particularly would be earth shattering inside the files themselves. The system doesn't want to get us used to things being rapidly declassified. They don't want a president to be able to come in and say, here's an executive order, and I said declassify it because the people demand it, and it happens like that as fast as it could happen. They don't want that to happen. They want to condition us that okay, the president the American people elected, he may have come in and lawfully given us an order, but there's a process here. There's an interagency process. Everyone gets to check to make sure there's nothing still classified or still ongoing, even if it was from
Yeah, this is a great little series that Tim Heidecker had. I think it's really funny.
1963 or even further back, because again, they don't want us conditioned to we can just have access to this information. And I think there's probably times where that would be appropriate, like something declassifying something that happened last week, for instance.
Sure.
Yeah, there's going to be equities there, and I think the American people would understand that.
I agree.
But a lot of this, I think, is power. And so the bureaucracy, when the president says declassify this, regardless of what it is, from decades ago, they can't just let them have it. They all want to have their cuts on it. They want to be able to control it.
This guy's deep state posting.
And this is the way the bureaucracy and the career bureaucrats roll, and they just tell the new political point.
Okay, the rest of this is useless. They're looping. So a complete softball interview, no skepticism whatsoever. It was done immediately after a termination. This seems like an op. It seems like they planned this shit. They're lying. They're doing the just asking questions bit. They're totally in it for themselves. Don't trust these guys as far as you can throw them. Tucker is a dangerous, dangerous person. You should not be glazing him. If you're on the left or the right, these people are venomous. They're not good. They're bad people. And even though they are against, or at least they say they're against this war, notwithstanding the fact that they supported the guy who brought us into this war, you should not turn off your defenses, your inoculation against these people. It really just boggles the mind. This entire an hour, we sat 2 hours plus analyzing the shit. They have given Trump a complete pass on everything and have suggested that the most likely scenario for why he's fucking up is because Israel is threatening his family or some shit like that, without any evidence whatsoever. But they leave that impression on millions of people, and that's what it's going to have. They're going to think that this is all Israel, all Israel, all Israel. It's a big sweep, and they're clearly angling for either the grift, the podcaster angle, or political power, or maybe to bolster J.D. Vance perhaps a little bit and give him a little bit of cover and push the administration to ending this disastrous war. So that's the take, man. That's the take. You don't need to glaze these people. These people suck. Fuck the war, but I love you guys. And thank you so much for the support. It means the world to me. It means the world to me. We're ending stream. I know that it's a bit late and I have to do stuff tomorrow. So you're not going to see me this weekend. Probably not Friday either, but tomorrow I'll stream. And I love you guys so much. Appreciate you. Like the stream, sub, and stay cool. Yeah, I have to go. But stay cool.